Tonight we're venturing into a hidden world of agricultural genius. Imagine standing at the foot of a vast mountain, the wind biting at your skin as you look up at a massive stepped hillside. It's not a natural formation. It's the work of the Inca, the empire that ruled much of South America before the Spanish arrived. The Incas, living in the unforgiving Andean highlands, created farming systems that allowed them to thrive in some of the harshest environments on Earth. And while you might think you wouldn't last a day in the thin mountain air, believe it or not, the Inca farmers not only survived, they flourished. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and the time. It's always cool to see where everyone's tuning in from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The Inca Empire was an agricultural marvel, not by sheer accident, but through an extraordinary combination of environmental understanding, engineering skill, and respect for the natural world. You might think it's a tough gig just to get some decent potatoes to grow in the high-altitude cold. But the Incas, they turned farming into an art form. These ingenious farmers worked with the land instead of fighting against it, shaping mountainsides into vast terraces, developing intricate irrigation systems, and cultivating a staggering variety of crops. Their methods were so advanced that even modern agricultural scientists still study them today. But how did they do it? The Incas were farming under some of the most difficult conditions in the world. High-altitude plateaus, rocky slopes, and unpredictable weather patterns were just the beginning of their challenges. And yet, they created an agricultural empire that fed millions and supported one of the most advanced civilizations the world has ever known. Historians still argue over the specific techniques they used, but the results are undeniable. The Incas mastered farming techniques that helped them thrive in places that would have been considered uninhabitable by most other cultures. So, let's dig into this mystery a little deeper and see how the Incas managed to achieve what many thought was impossible. The Incas didn't just grow crops, they transformed the very land they inhabited. Standing on a high-altitude plateau, you might look out and see acres of land stretched beneath a sky that seems impossibly vast. In such a location, you wouldn't expect much to grow. After all, temperatures drop sharply at night, and the soil is rocky and dry. But if you took a closer look, you'd see a series of perfectly carved terraces, each one like a step in an ancient staircase. The terraces were not just beautiful, they were the key to Incan agriculture. These terraces, often built into the sides of steep mountains, weren't just a pretty sight. They were engineering marvels, designed to maximize space, conserve water, and prevent soil erosion. Each terrace was constructed with a slight incline to channel water evenly across the fields. And speaking of water, the Inca also figured out how to harness it efficiently. They would often build irrigation systems to carry water from nearby rivers, diverting it into the terraces through a series of carefully crafted canals and channels. These channels, often made from stone, would snake through the terraces, ensuring that each crop received the perfect amount of moisture. Nothing too much, nothing too little. Historians still argue whether the Incas used advanced mathematical principles to determine the exact angles of their terraces, but the fact remains, the terraces were incredibly effective. The Incas knew that by building these layered fields, they could control the growing environment more precisely, helping to create a microclimate where crops would thrive despite the harsh conditions. It was as if the mountain itself had been reshaped to serve the needs of the empire. But the terraces didn't just serve a functional purpose. They were also part of the Incas' larger agricultural philosophy. The Incas believed in reciprocity, a spiritual understanding that nature and humanity were in a delicate balance and that each helped the other thrive. This principle influenced their farming techniques, where every plant had its place in the grand scheme of things, from maize to potatoes to quinoa. But it wasn't just about growing crops. It was about respecting the land, ensuring that every step taken was done with careful thought and reverence. And of course, it wasn't all just about practicality. These terraces had an aesthetic value too. The Inca had a deep connection to their environment, and the steps carved into the mountain slopes were also a symbol of this relationship. The landscape became more than just a place to grow food. It was part of the larger cultural and spiritual identity of the Incan people. But while the terraces were a feat of architectural genius, they were just one piece of the puzzle. The Incas didn't stop there. They also had an entire system for managing the fertility of the soil, which, as any farmer will tell you, is just as important as having good irrigation. So let's talk about soil. It's the unsung hero of any farming operation. But the Incas understood its importance on a level that still surprises us today. Imagine standing at the edge of one of those terraces, feeling the cold breeze of the Andes on your face, and looking down at the fertile soil beneath you. It's rich and dark, far better than the dry, rocky land you'd expect to find in such a harsh environment. But how did they do it? How did the Incas manage to turn poor, eroded soils into a powerhouse of agricultural production? The answer lies in their unique soil management techniques. First off, the Incas were masters of composting. They used all sorts of organic materials, plant remains, animal manure, even fish and marine plants from the coast, to create nutrient-rich compost that could be spread over their crops. This was a far cry from the chemical fertilizers that dominate modern agriculture today. By turning natural materials into compost, the Incas were not only enriching their soil, but also ensuring that it would remain fertile year after year. And it wasn't just about adding nutrients. The Incas also knew how to preserve the structure of the soil itself. They used a system of crop rotation that helped prevent the soil from becoming depleted of essential nutrients. By alternating between different types of crops, the Incas allowed the soil to rest and regenerate, ensuring that it remained fertile. Some scholars argue that this was one of the reasons the Inca Empire was able to sustain such a large population for so long without overworking their land. The idea of letting the earth recover before planting again is still a practice in modern sustainable farming, but the Incas were centuries ahead of their time. But there was another secret to their soil management that's even more fascinating. They used a technique called terra preta, or black earth. This involved mixing charcoal into the soil, creating a highly fertile and moisture-retentive environment. While terra preta is mostly associated with the Amazonian cultures, there are indications that the Incas might have used similar methods. Historians still argue over whether the Incas truly adopted terra preta, but there's no denying the incredible fertility of the soils they cultivated. One of the more surprising facts about Incan farming is that they were also expert at growing crops in places where other civilizations would have given up entirely. For example, in the high-altitude areas of the Andes, where oxygen is scarce and the growing season is short, the Incas still managed to produce bountiful harvests. How? Well, one key to their success was their use of microclimates. You've probably heard of microclimates in weather forecasting, small areas where the climate differs from the surrounding area. The Incas were keenly aware of these microclimates and used them to their advantage. By carefully choosing where they planted crops, they could take advantage of slight temperature differences, variations in humidity, or shifts in wind patterns. In some cases, they even manipulated the microclimates themselves, building walls, or creating shaded areas to protect sensitive crops like maize or coca plants. Historians still argue about the specifics of how they mastered these microclimates, but there's little debate about their effectiveness. In many ways, the Incas' ability to harness the power of small-scale environmental variations was key to their agricultural success, allowing them to grow crops at altitudes and latitudes that most other civilizations would never have attempted. And that's the beauty of Incan agriculture. It wasn't just about working harder. It was about working smarter. They didn't have modern tools or technology, yet they were able to create systems that allowed them to thrive where others would have faltered. With a deep understanding of the land and a respect for nature, they turned the unforgiving mountainsides of the Andes into fertile, productive farmlands. And it's a testament to their ingenuity that even today, modern scientists are still trying to uncover the secrets behind their methods. If there's one thing the Incas understood better than anyone, it was the significance of water. And let's face it, when you're farming in the Andean highlands, where rain is scarce and rivers are often far away, It's not just about having water, it's about managing it with precision. The Incas didn't just plant crops and hope for the best. They designed entire irrigation systems that allowed them to water their crops with remarkable efficiency, ensuring their farms thrived despite the harsh climate. Imagine walking along one of those terraces, looking down at the narrow channels of water flowing gently through the land. These channels didn't just appear out of nowhere. They were the result of painstakingly crafted irrigation systems that stretched across the mountainsides. The Incas engineered intricate networks of aqueducts, canals, and stone channels, all designed to channel precious water to where it was needed most. They understood that water, like soil, was a resource that needed to be carefully managed to maximize crop yields. One of the most fascinating things about Inca irrigation is how they used gravity to their advantage. By carefully mapping out the landscape, they designed irrigation channels that used the natural slope of the land to carry water from higher altitudes down to the terraces below. And because the Incas didn't have modern pumps or machinery, they relied entirely on gravity to move the water. Think about it. These ancient engineers were able to create a water delivery system that was so efficient, it still stands today as a marvel of engineering. Historians still debate how exactly the Incas managed to create such intricate systems without modern technology. Some believe they used a deep understanding of the natural world and geometry to calculate the precise angles needed to ensure the water flowed evenly. Others speculate that the Incas used a combination of trial and error, learning over generations which methods worked best for their environment. But regardless of how they did it, the result was a water distribution system that allowed them to farm in areas where others would have struggled to even grow a blade of grass. But the Incas didn't stop at just irrigating their crops. They also understood the importance of preserving water. In the dry seasons, they built storage systems, such as reservoirs and cisterns, to capture and hold water for later use. These reservoirs were often built into the side of mountains, and the water would be stored until it was needed to irrigate crops during the drier months. This ability to store and manage water meant that the Incas could grow crops year-round, no matter the season. And it wasn't just about practicality. There was also a deep spiritual connection to water in Incan culture. The Incas believed that water was a gift from the gods, and many of their irrigation systems were built with reverence to the sacred nature of water. In fact, some historians argue that the design of Incan irrigation systems was influenced by their religious beliefs, particularly their worship of the sun god, Inti. After all, water was vital for crops, and crops were vital for survival. It was a delicate balance, one that the Incas maintained through their intricate sacred systems. But there's another, lesser-known aspect of Incan water management that's equally fascinating: the use of sacred springs. These natural springs were believed to be the dwelling places of water deities, and the Incas often built their irrigation systems around these sacred sources. By channeling water from these springs into their agricultural systems, the Incas not only ensured a steady water supply, but also honored the spiritual significance of water. Historians still argue whether these sacred springs were purely symbolic or whether they actually played a practical role in Incan farming. But one thing is clear: the Incas' relationship with water was far more than just a matter of survival. It was deeply embedded in their culture and spirituality. The skill with which the Incas managed water is one of the reasons their farming systems were so successful. In a world where agriculture was often a gamble, the Incas' ability to control and direct water ensured that they could consistently produce crops, even in the most difficult conditions. And while modern irrigation systems have certainly come a long way, there's something undeniably awe-inspiring about the ingenuity of the Incas' ancient methods. Let's dive into a subject that may not get enough credit in most agricultural conversations: soil fertility. As you stand in the midst of an ancient Incan farm, it's easy to overlook the subtle ways in which the Incas ensured that their land remained productive year after year. After all, crops don't just grow by themselves. In fact, soil fertility is the backbone of any successful farming operation, and the Incas had some pretty advanced techniques for ensuring their fields stayed rich in nutrients. First, we need to talk about the organic approach to farming that the Incas mastered. You might think of soil fertility as something that can only be achieved with synthetic fertilizers and fancy agricultural machines. But for the Incas, their solution was remarkably simple and natural. They relied on organic methods that kept the soil healthy without depleting it of vital nutrients. And one of their key techniques was composting. They made use of everything, from decaying plant matter and animal manure to fish remains. These organic materials were carefully combined and allowed to break down, creating nutrient-rich compost that could be spread over their fields. This was far from an accidental discovery. The Incas were keen observers of the natural world, and they understood the importance of recycling organic matter back into the soil. By composting, they enriched the soil with essential nutrients, preventing the depletion of the land. In modern farming, we call this sustainable agriculture, using nature's resources wisely without exhausting them. The Incas, however, had been practicing this method for centuries, long before it became a trend. But composting wasn't the only tool in their fertility toolbox. The Incas also understood the importance of crop rotation. You've probably heard that planting the same crops in the same soil year after year can lead to nutrient depletion. Well, the Incas solved that problem by rotating crops. They didn't just grow the same thing over and over again. Instead, they alternated between different types of crops, allowing the soil to recover and regenerate. This helped maintain soil health and ensure that their farms continued to produce at high levels. It's a technique that is still used by modern farmers today. Historians still argue about the exact details of how the Incas managed their soil fertility, but there's little doubt that their practices were far ahead of their time. Some believe the Incas used a technique known as terra preta, a method of adding charcoal to the soil to increase its fertility. Terra preta, known for its ability to retain moisture and encourage beneficial microbial life, was found in the Amazon region and has recently attracted interest in modern sustainable farming. While it's unclear whether the Incas were using exactly the same process, it's likely that they were using a similar approach to enhance soil fertility. And of course, it wasn't all about what went into the soil. It was also about what stayed in the soil. The Incas were particularly skilled at maintaining soil structure, preventing erosion, and ensuring that their terraces stayed intact year after year. Without soil erosion, their fields remained fertile, and their agricultural system remained productive. The steep terraces, combined with their knowledge of soil preservation techniques, allowed the Incas to farm at altitudes and in regions where the land was naturally prone to erosion. Beyond their technical innovations, the Incas also took a holistic approach to farming. Their respect for the earth and its cycles influenced every aspect of their agricultural practices. The Incan way of farming was intertwined with their spirituality, a belief that the earth and its resources were sacred. They believed in giving back to the land and ensuring that the soil remained healthy for future generations. This connection to nature was not just practical, it was a central part of their worldview, one that emphasized balance, respect, and reciprocity. In a way, the Incas' agricultural methods were a reflection of their entire civilization. They didn't see farming as a means to an end. It was part of a larger, interconnected system that kept their society running smoothly. The same care and attention they gave to their crops was applied to their social structures, their architecture, and their spiritual beliefs. Farming, for the Incas, wasn't just about food, it was a way of life. Now that we've covered soil fertility and crop management, let's talk about something that was just as essential to the Incan agricultural empire: water. Without water, all of those beautifully crafted terraces and fertile fields would have dried up in the harsh Andean environment. But the Incas didn't leave their water supply to chance. They created a network of irrigation systems that was nothing short of a marvel of ancient engineering. Picture yourself walking along one of the terraced fields with the sun warming your back. Below, you see narrow stone channels winding their way through the landscape, carefully distributing water from distant rivers to the crops. These channels are no accident. They're part of a complex system of aqueducts and irrigation networks that the Incas designed to ensure that water flowed precisely where it was needed. Without these channels, their agricultural system would have been impossible to sustain. The Incas didn't just build irrigation systems, they engineered them to perfection. The water channels they created weren't just functional, they were strategically placed, designed to maximize efficiency and minimize waste. And it wasn't just about moving water from one place to another, it was about managing the flow, ensuring that water reached every terrace in exactly the right amount. This wasn't a simple task. The Incas had to take into account the steep mountain slopes, seasonal rainfall variations, and the geography of the land. Yet somehow, they managed to build a system that worked flawlessly. One of the most remarkable things about Incan irrigation was their ability to harness gravity. By using the natural slope of the land, the Incas created channels that could carry water down from higher altitudes without needing pumps or complex machinery. In fact, the entire system was built around the principle of gravity, ensuring that water would flow naturally and evenly to where it was needed most. This simple yet ingenious approach to water management meant that the Incas didn't have to rely on costly or complicated technology. They just worked with the land, using its natural features to their advantage. The effectiveness of these irrigation systems cannot be overstated. They allowed the Incas to farm in areas that would otherwise have been too dry or too steep to cultivate. In the arid highlands where water was a precious commodity, these irrigation networks were essential for growing crops. By channeling water to their fields, the Incas were able to sustain large agricultural operations, even in regions where most civilizations would have struggled to grow anything at all. Historians still debate whether the Incas used advanced methods of surveying and engineering to design these systems, or if they relied on simpler methods of trial and error. Regardless of how they did it, there's no denying that their irrigation systems were ahead of their time. Some scholars even argue that the Inca irrigation networks were far more advanced than anything in Europe at the time, and that their methods influenced agricultural practices for centuries to come. Beyond practicality, there was also a spiritual component to Inca water management. The Incas revered water as a sacred resource, often linking it to their gods and religious practices. The sun god Inti, the earth goddess Pachamama, and other deities were believed to control the flow of water, and the Incas built their irrigation systems with this spiritual connection in mind. Some historians argue that the design of the irrigation networks was influenced by religious beliefs, with the positioning of channels and aqueducts reflecting the sacred relationship between humans and nature. Water was more than just a necessity. It was a symbol of life itself. The Incas viewed water as a gift from the gods, and their farming practices worked around the idea of reciprocity, giving back to the earth what they took from it. This spiritual approach to farming was reflected in their rituals, which often involved offering prayers or sacrifices to ensure that the water supply would continue to flow. For the Incas, water wasn't just something to be controlled, it was something to be respected, cherished, and maintained. When you think about it, the Incas' ability to control and manage water is one of the most impressive aspects of their agricultural success. They didn't just build irrigation systems, they created a water management infrastructure that allowed them to thrive in one of the harshest climates on Earth. Their ability to work with nature rather than against it was a key reason why their empire was able to feed millions of people, sustain large populations, and grow crops in some of the most unlikely places. And as we face the challenges of modern water scarcity, we might do well to look back at the Incas' methods for inspiration. As we continue to explore the genius of Incan agriculture, it's impossible to ignore one crucial factor in their success: crop diversity. The Incas didn't simply focus on a few staple crops, like maize or potatoes. No, they grew a staggering variety of plants, taking advantage of every inch of their diverse empire. This crop diversity was a key part of their ability to thrive in such a challenging environment. Imagine walking through an Incan agricultural terrace, where rows of potatoes, quinoa, maize, and beans intermingle, their colors blending harmoniously with the landscape. At first glance, it might seem like chaos, but there's a method to the madness. The Incas understood that having a wide variety of crops was a hedge against the unpredictability of nature. In the highlands, where frost, drought, and pest infestations were constant threats, growing multiple crops helped ensure that at least some would survive the harsh conditions. This is a form of insurance. By planting a range of crops, the Incas reduced their risk of total crop failure. Historians still debate whether the Incas intentionally planned their agricultural systems based on modern principles of biodiversity, but the results speak for themselves. In addition to potatoes and maize, the Incas also grew crops like quinoa, amaranth, beans, and various types of squash. Each of these plants played a unique role in their diet, and together they created a balanced and sustainable food system. The Incas even cultivated medicinal plants, which were essential for both healing and spiritual practices. This variety of crops not only ensured food security, but also helped maintain the soil's health by introducing different nutrients into the earth, preventing depletion from a single crop species. One of the most remarkable aspects of Inca crop diversity was their ability to grow these plants at varying altitudes. The Incan Empire stretched from the high Andes to the coastal deserts, and the Incas knew how to adapt their farming practices to different environments. In the high-altitude areas, they focused on crops that could handle the cold temperatures and shorter growing seasons, like potatoes, quinoa, and various tubers. In the lower, warmer regions, they grew maize, coca, and cotton, crops that thrived in hotter climates. The Incas used their knowledge of microclimates to their advantage, planting crops based on the specific needs of each environment. It wasn't just about surviving the environment either. The Incas understood that crop diversity was key to the nutritional health of their society. Each crop had its own unique nutritional profile, and the Incas were meticulous about ensuring their people received a balanced diet. Potatoes, for instance, provided carbohydrates, while quinoa and amaranth offered proteins. Maize was a dietary staple, and beans offered essential fiber and additional protein. This variety meant that the Incas were less reliant on a single crop, giving them a safety net in case of bad weather or crop disease. This concept of diversification is still a principle used in modern agriculture today, with many experts encouraging farmers to plant multiple crops to improve food security. What's truly fascinating is that the Incas didn't just grow crops for food, they also cultivated plants for ritualistic purposes. The coca plant, for instance, was sacred to the Incas. It was grown in the lower altitudes of the empire, where it thrived in the warmer climate. Coca leaves were chewed by the Inca elite and used in religious ceremonies, offering both a mild stimulant and a spiritual connection to their gods. The sacred nature of the coca plant also meant that it was grown with great care and respect, often in ceremonial gardens or special areas designated for sacred crops. It's likely that the Incas treated their crop diversity as part of a larger spiritual and ecological system, where every plant had its place in the broader web of life. Historians still argue over whether the extensive use of sacred plants was a deliberate part of the Incan agricultural system, but many believe it was. After all, the Incas weren't just growing crops for sustenance. They were cultivating a deep connection with the land, understanding that food and spirituality were intertwined. Their respect for nature and the divine was reflected in every aspect of their farming practices, from the crops they grew to the rituals they performed. Perhaps one of the most enduring legacies of the Incas' crop diversity is their impact on modern agriculture. Many of the crops they cultivated, like potatoes, quinoa, and maize, are now staples in diets around the world. In fact, it's believed that the Incas were responsible for the domestication and widespread cultivation of the potato, which is now a global crop. The Incas also spread their knowledge of crop diversity and sustainable farming techniques to neighboring cultures, who adopted and adapted these practices in their own agricultural systems. When we think about food security today, it's clear that we have much to learn from the Incas. Their emphasis on crop diversity, sustainable practices, and a holistic approach to farming can teach us valuable lessons in how to nourish ourselves and our planet. And just as the Incas' agricultural practices supported their empire for centuries, so too can modern agricultural systems benefit from a more diverse and respectful approach to farming. At the heart of the Inca agricultural system, there was one crop that stood head and shoulders above the rest: Potatoes. Yes, that humble starchy tuber that you probably associate with fries, mashed potatoes, or chips had an enormous role in the survival and expansion of the Incan Empire. To the Incas, the potato wasn't just food, it was a vital cornerstone of their civilization, providing sustenance and supporting their entire social structure. Imagine yourself standing in the high altitudes of the Andes, the chilly wind nipping at your cheeks, surrounded by sprawling potato fields. You might be surprised to find such a crop thriving in this cold, rocky environment. But the Incas knew the potato was perfectly suited to these conditions. Over time, they developed more than 3,000 varieties of potatoes, each tailored to different climates and altitudes, ensuring a steady and varied supply of food, no matter what the season or weather conditions. In fact, historians argue that the domestication of the potato was one of the Incas' greatest agricultural achievements. Without it, the empire's ability to sustain such a large population in the highlands would have been impossible. Why potatoes? Well, for one, they are highly nutritious and can be stored for long periods of time without spoiling. They were the perfect crop for the Incas, who faced long, harsh winters where fresh food could be scarce. Potatoes provided a reliable, calorie-dense food source that kept the population well fed throughout the year. This was crucial in a world without refrigeration or modern preservation methods. And it wasn't just about filling bellies. The potato was also a key part of the Incan social structure. The Incas used potatoes as a form of currency and tribute, and they were deeply integrated into their religious and ceremonial practices. The Incas had a rather interesting method of preserving potatoes. In the high altitude regions where temperatures often dipped below freezing, the Incas would freeze the potatoes overnight and then let them thaw during the day. This process helped preserve the potatoes for months at a time, allowing them to survive the harsh winter months. The potatoes were also dried, creating a shelf-stable food source that could be stored for long periods and transported across the vast Inca Empire. Dried potatoes, known as chuño, were especially important because they could be rehydrated and eaten during times of scarcity. It's no surprise that the potato became the backbone of Inca agriculture and the food system that supported their empire. Interestingly, historians still argue over the origins of the potato in the Andes. While most agree that the potato was first domesticated in what is now modern-day Peru, there is ongoing debate about the specific role of different indigenous groups in the development of the potato. Some believe that the potato was first cultivated by the Incas, while others argue that it was domesticated by pre-Inca cultures who passed down their knowledge to the Inca civilization. Regardless of who discovered the potato, what is undeniable is the Incas' expertise in cultivating and diversifying the crop. But the potato wasn't just a staple food. It also had a spiritual significance to the Incas. In Incan cosmology, food was closely tied to the earth, and the potato was often considered a sacred gift from Pachamama, the earth goddess. The Incas believed that all plants, especially those used for food, had spiritual significance, and potatoes were no exception. In fact, the Incan agricultural calendar was tied to the cycles of the moon and the sun, and planting and harvesting potatoes was often marked by religious ceremonies. The rituals around planting potatoes were thought to ensure a bountiful harvest, and the potato was sometimes included in offerings to the gods. While the Incas' reverence for potatoes is well documented, the crop's impact on the broader world is often overlooked. It's easy to forget that the potato, which is now a global food staple, was once an entirely new crop to the rest of the world. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in South America, they brought back potatoes to Europe, where they were initially met with suspicion. It wasn't until centuries later that the potato became a central crop in European agriculture, revolutionizing food systems across the continent and eventually spreading worldwide. Today, the potato remains one of the most important food crops in the world, and it owes much of its global prominence to the Inca Empire. In fact, some historians argue that the potato played a major role in the population explosion of Europe during the 18th and 19th centuries. The crop's ability to provide a cheap, nutritious food source helped fuel the growth of cities and industrialization. And it all began with the Incan mastery of this humble tuber, grown in the high Andes, preserved through ancient techniques, and carefully cultivated to feed millions. So, the next time you sit down to a plate of mashed potatoes or fries, take a moment to think about the Incas and their incredible agricultural legacy. They didn't just feed their empire with potatoes, they changed the course of global food history. Another crop that held immense cultural and agricultural importance in the Inca Empire was maize. This wasn't just any crop, it was sacred. For the Incas, maize or corn was more than food, it was a symbol of life itself. The grain was integral to their diet, their spirituality, and their social structure. The Incas believed that maize was a gift from their gods, particularly from the sun god, Inti. It wasn't just a food source, it was a connection to the divine. Picture yourself in the warmth of the lower altitudes of the Andes, where the sun shines brighter and the weather is more forgiving. Here, the Incas cultivated fields of tall maize, its golden kernels ripening in the bright sun. The fields would stretch for miles, and during the harvest, the air would be filled with the sound of the golden ears being plucked from the plants. To the Incas, maize wasn't just food, it was a sacred commodity. The very act of planting, growing, and harvesting maize was seen as a religious duty, a ritual that honored the gods and ensured prosperity for the empire. The Incas' reverence for maize was reflected in their agricultural practices. They understood that this crop, like potatoes, thrived in specific conditions. While potatoes could survive in colder highlands, maize required warmer climates and long growing seasons. So the Incas grew maize primarily in the lower altitude valleys, where the conditions were perfect for it. These regions, known as the Ceja de Montaña, or eyebrow of the mountain, were rich with fertile soil, making them ideal for cultivating maize. The terraces here were often arranged to maximize sunlight and warmth, with the crops carefully spaced to allow for optimal growth. Historians still debate the role of maize in Inca religious life, but it's clear that maize was more than just a food source for the Incas. It was a symbol of abundance and the divine. The Incas held elaborate festivals dedicated to Inti, where maize was central to the rituals. During these celebrations, the Incas would offer sacrifices of maize to their gods in hopes of ensuring another bountiful harvest. The sacred nature of maize was further reinforced by its presence in Incan mythology, where the god Pachamama, Mother Earth, was said to have gifted the Incas with maize, which was considered the food of life. This spiritual connection to maize wasn't just symbolic, it was practical too. The Incas used maize for a variety of purposes, from grinding it into flour for bread and cakes to brewing it into chicha, a fermented corn drink that was enjoyed during celebrations and religious ceremonies. The Incas were masters at utilizing the maize plant in nearly every aspect of their lives. The husks were used for crafting baskets, mats, and other items, while the kernels themselves could be stored for months, ensuring food security even during harsh seasons. Maize also had significant social implications. The size of a person's maize harvest could be a reflection of their status in Incan society. It was used as a form of tribute and as a currency in some instances. In the agricultural system, different communities were responsible for growing different crops, and maize was often grown by elite communities or by those who had land specifically set aside for its cultivation. The agricultural labor was divided by the state through the mita system, which required the people to work on the land in exchange for food and protection. This helped maintain social order and ensured that the empire's agricultural needs were met. One thing that sets the Inca maize cultivation apart from other ancient civilizations is their sophisticated knowledge of breeding. The Incas didn't just plant maize, they selectively bred different varieties to suit their needs. In fact, the varieties of maize grown in the Incan Empire were likely the result of careful breeding to improve traits like size, drought tolerance, and the ability to mature quickly. Historians and geneticists argue that the diverse varieties of maize cultivated by the Incas were critical in making sure that they could grow the crop across the different regions of their vast empire. From high-altitude cold environments to the warmer valley regions, the Incas had maize varieties that could adapt to a range of conditions. This adaptability helped them spread the crop across their entire territory and maximize yields, creating a more robust and sustainable agricultural system. Interestingly, modern scientists have studied the ancient maize grown by the Incas to understand how they achieved such incredible agricultural results. One theory suggests that ancient Incan maize was much more genetically diverse than most modern crops, which are often bred for uniformity and size. This genetic diversity allowed the maize to withstand a variety of environmental stresses, from frost to drought. It's believed that some of the maize varieties cultivated by the Incas might hold the key to developing more resilient crops in the face of modern-day challenges, such as climate change. In a sense, the story of Incan maize is not just a tale of an ancient agricultural civilization. It's a reminder of the lasting influence that ancient farming practices can have on the present. From the sacred role of maize in Incan spirituality to its practical use in everyday life, the crop was central to the Inca way of life. Even today, its impact can be seen in how the world grows and consumes maize. For the Incas, maize was not just an essential crop. It was a living link between the gods, the earth, and the people. As we've seen, the Incas were master agriculturalists, but there's another crucial component of their farming system that made their empire thrive: the sacred coca plant. In many ways, the coca plant was as central to Incan society as potatoes and maize. It wasn't just grown for its stimulating effects, but for its deep cultural, spiritual, and economic significance. So let's take a closer look at this revered plant and its integral role in Incan life. Imagine yourself walking through the lush valleys of the Incan Empire, where you come across fields of coca plants, their broad green leaves swaying gently in the breeze. While the rest of the world might see a simple shrub, the Incas saw something far more powerful: a plant that connected them to the gods. Coca was sacred to the Inca people, and its cultivation was deeply tied to religious rituals. The Incas believed that the coca plant was a gift from the gods, particularly from the sun god, Inti, and it played an essential role in the spiritual life of the empire. Coca leaves were used in various ceremonial and ritual contexts. One of the most important uses was in the practice of chipi, where the leaves were chewed, releasing small amounts of alkaloids that acted as a stimulant. In the high altitudes of the Andes, where the air is thin and oxygen levels are low, the stimulating effects of coca helped the Incas endure the physical demands of daily life. The leaves allowed workers, including those laboring on agricultural terraces or in the high-altitude mines, to maintain their energy and focus. The spiritual importance of coca was also immense. During major ceremonies, the Incas would offer coca leaves to their gods as a form of tribute. They believed that by offering coca to the gods, they could ensure the favor of the deities and secure bountiful harvests. Religious leaders and shamans would often chew coca in order to enter a meditative or trance-like state, allowing them to communicate with the divine and interpret the will of the gods. The leaves weren't just consumed, they were integral to the very rituals that bound Incan society together. Interestingly, historians still debate the extent to which the Incas used coca for recreational purposes versus religious and ceremonial ones. While many ancient records suggest that coca was chewed primarily for ritualistic reasons, there's evidence to suggest that the Incas, like their descendants, used it as a form of social bonding. It's not hard to imagine how sharing a small amount of coca could serve as an icebreaker during community gatherings, or how it could help workers focus during the long hours of farm labor. Regardless of its use, one thing is clear: coca was far more than a stimulant. It was a cornerstone of Inca culture, and the empire's success was closely tied to its cultivation. But the significance of coca wasn't just spiritual or medicinal. The plant was also vital to the economic and political structure of the Inca Empire. The Incas used coca leaves as a form of tribute and currency. As part of the mita labor system, workers were required to produce goods, including coca, which were then offered to the state as tribute. In return, the state provided the workers with food, shelter, and protection. Coca was a valuable commodity that transcended mere agricultural output. It was a symbol of the wealth and power of the Inca state. Beyond the direct cultivation of coca, the Incas also had a deep understanding of its medicinal properties. While modern science would later uncover the many therapeutic uses of coca, The Incas were already well aware of its pain-relieving qualities. Coca leaves were used to treat a range of ailments, from fatigue and altitude sickness to digestive problems and headaches. By chewing the leaves or making infusions, the Incas were able to manage the physical stress that came with living in such a demanding environment. One of the most fascinating aspects of coca cultivation was its integration into the broader ecological system of the Inca Empire. Unlike maize and potatoes, which were grown across a wide range of altitudes, coca was primarily cultivated in the lower valleys, particularly in areas with warmer climates. The plant thrived in the subtropical regions, where the Inca Empire's agricultural engineers were able to design irrigation systems that supplied the plants with just the right amount of water. Coca, like maize and potatoes, was a crop that reflected the Incas' advanced knowledge of microclimates and their ability to adapt their farming practices to different environments. Some historians argue that the widespread cultivation of coca helped the Incas manage their empire, particularly when it came to organizing labor. The stimulating effects of the coca leaves allowed workers to perform their duties for long hours without tiring. This would have been especially useful for large state-run agricultural projects, as well as military campaigns, where stamina was essential. The Incas' ability to harness the power of coca for both spiritual and practical purposes likely played a crucial role in the efficiency of their society. Interestingly, the legacy of coca cultivation continues to this day. While the plant has become infamous in modern times due to its role in the production of cocaine, it was once considered a sacred and essential part of indigenous Andean culture. The Incas' reverence for coca and their sophisticated methods of cultivation paved the way for its lasting impact on the region. Today, coca continues to be a part of life for many indigenous communities in the Andes who still cultivate the plant for traditional, non-recreational uses. In conclusion, the sacred coca plant was much more than just a crop for the Incas. It was a symbol of their spiritual connection to the earth and the gods, a vital source of energy for workers, and a key economic and political asset for the empire. Its cultivation and use in Incan society illustrate how deeply intertwined agriculture, culture, and spirituality were in the ancient world. Even in modern times, the legacy of coca's role in the Inca Empire remains a testament to the complexity and sophistication of their agricultural system. As we dive deeper into the Inca Empire's agricultural brilliance, it becomes evident that they didn't just grow food for their own consumption. They created an agricultural system that was intimately connected with trade and the broader economy. While we often associate the Incas with monumental constructions like Machu Picchu or their complex societal systems, their trade networks were just as crucial to sustaining the empire. In fact, the exchange of agricultural products and innovations was a key part of the Incan economy, helping their empire thrive over vast distances and under challenging conditions. Imagine walking through one of the bustling Incan marketplaces. The air is thick with the scent of freshly harvested maize, potatoes, and quinoa. Traders shout as they sell everything from woven textiles to coca leaves. While you might think that such a market would focus mostly on luxury items, you'd be surprised at how essential agricultural goods were in sustaining the empire's expansive economy. The Incas had an efficient system for exchanging goods, and agriculture was at the very heart of it. The empire's trade network spanned thousands of miles, connecting people from the high-altitude Andean highlands to the lush valleys, and even down to the coastal regions. Each region specialized in producing specific crops that were best suited to its environment. For example, in the high-altitude regions, where potatoes and quinoa thrived, the Incas could grow large quantities of these crops. Meanwhile, the valleys and coastal regions were perfect for maize, coca, and cotton. The diversity of crops across these regions allowed the Incas to trade goods that were essential for the entire empire's functioning. This specialization wasn't just a luxury, it was a necessity for an empire of such vast size and varying climates. Historians still debate whether the Incas used a formal currency for trade, but it's clear that agricultural products like maize, potatoes, and coca leaves functioned as a form of barter. In fact, the agricultural surplus produced in the regions was crucial for the state-run economy. This surplus was redistributed through the state-controlled Inca storehouses, which were strategically located across the empire. These storehouses held grain, dried potatoes, textiles, and other essential goods, ensuring that during times of famine or war, there would always be provisions for the people. What's particularly impressive is how the Incas managed to keep these agricultural goods flowing smoothly across such a vast territory. There were no cars or trucks to transport goods, no planes to quickly get food from one place to another. Instead, the Incas relied on an intricate network of roads and relay runners to move goods. The Incas constructed thousands of miles of roads through rugged terrain, from the high Andes down to the coastal deserts, and even into the Amazonian rainforest. These roads were essential for trade, but they were also used for communication, making it possible to send messages, goods, and even agricultural knowledge from one region to another. A good example of how this trade worked can be found in the exchange between the highland regions and the coastal areas. While the highlands were ideal for growing potatoes and quinoa, the coastal areas were better suited for maize and cotton. The highland farmers would trade their potatoes with the people living in the valleys or on the coast, who in turn would trade maize and textiles back. This not only created a steady flow of goods throughout the empire, but also ensured that everyone had access to a diverse range of food products, textiles, and other goods. These trade networks helped stabilize the empire, ensuring that no region ever experienced extreme shortages. In addition to regional agricultural products, the Incas also traded with neighboring civilizations. Though the Inca Empire was vast, they were not the only civilization in South America with advanced agricultural systems. Trade with cultures such as the Tiwanaku and the Moche allowed the Incas to share agricultural innovations, new crop varieties, and even techniques for soil conservation. Historians believe that the Incas learned about certain crops, such as quinoa and amaranth, through their interactions with neighboring peoples. The role of agriculture in Incan trade extended beyond just food. The cultivation of crops like cotton was important for making textiles, which were another critical part of the Inca economy. The Incas were skilled weavers, and their textiles were highly prized. In fact, the Incas used textiles not only as a form of trade, but also as a symbol of status. Fine garments made from cotton or alpaca wool were worn by the elite, while everyday people wore simpler clothes made from other materials. These textiles, traded alongside agricultural goods, helped to foster a sense of unity across the empire, as people in different regions could identify themselves through the styles and patterns of their clothing. As we look back at the Inca agricultural system, it becomes clear that their success wasn't just due to their innovations in farming techniques. Their ability to integrate agriculture into the broader economy through trade, storage, and even social organization was key to sustaining their empire. The Incas used agriculture to create an economic system that was able to feed millions, distribute goods efficiently, and maintain control over one of the largest empires in the world at the time. Today, when we think of global trade, it's easy to imagine vast shipping containers and complex logistics systems. But the Incas managed to achieve something similarly impressive, using simple but effective methods to move agricultural goods, maintain surplus supplies, and ensure the prosperity of their people. Their agricultural trade networks were, in many ways, ahead of their time. In addition to their advanced agricultural systems, the Incas were known for their ingenuity in developing methods for preserving food. With an empire that spanned such diverse climates and altitudes, ensuring a reliable food supply for the entire population required clever techniques that allowed food to be stored and transported over long distances. These preservation methods were not only a practical necessity, but also a testament to the Incas' understanding of their environment and their ability to adapt and innovate. Picture yourself in the high Andes, where the harsh cold and thin air can make even the simplest task a challenge. In these remote regions, where access to fresh food could be limited during certain seasons, the Incas developed techniques to ensure they never ran out of supplies. One of their most impressive methods of food preservation was drying. The Incas mastered drying potatoes, maize, and other crops to create long-lasting food that could be stored for months, even years. This process was incredibly important because it allowed the Incas to store surplus food during harvest periods and use it when fresh food was scarce. The most famous example of Inca food preservation is chuño, dried, freeze-dried potatoes. The process of making chuño was quite simple but effective. During the freezing nights in the high Andes, the potatoes would freeze and then thaw during the warmer daytime temperatures. This freeze-thaw cycle helped to remove moisture from the potatoes, preventing them from spoiling. After freezing, the potatoes would be left to dry in the sun. Once fully dried, they could be stored for long periods, providing a reliable food source for the Incas throughout the year. The freeze-drying process also made the potatoes much lighter and easier to transport, which was crucial for moving supplies across the empire's vast territory. Chuño was more than just a practical food. It also had a long shelf life and could be used in a variety of ways. The Incas would rehydrate the dried potatoes by soaking them in water or boiling them, creating a nutritious meal even during times when fresh produce wasn't available. This technique allowed the Inca people to maintain their food security, regardless of season or location. The fact that chuño could be transported across the empire's vast road systems meant that supplies could be sent to areas in need, such as during times of drought or famine. It was an early form of food distribution that kept the empire running smoothly, even in the harshest conditions. The drying process wasn't limited to potatoes. The Incas also dried maize and quinoa, which were staple crops in the empire. Dried maize could be stored in large quantities, ensuring that the Incas had a reliable food supply throughout the year. Quinoa, known for its nutritional density, was also dried and stored for later use. These dried crops not only provided food security, but also allowed the Incas to trade with other regions in the empire. Dried foods could be transported across great distances, ensuring that areas with surplus could supply those in need. This is a prime example of how the Incan agricultural and food storage systems worked together to create a stable and prosperous society. While drying was perhaps the most well-known preservation method, the Incas also developed techniques for storing food in natural cool environments. In the high-altitude regions of the Andes, the Incas built colcas, which were small, circular stone storage buildings. These buildings were designed to maintain a constant temperature, which helped preserve food like grains, dried potatoes, and maize. The cool, dry interiors of the colcas acted like natural refrigerators, keeping food fresh for longer periods of time. But food preservation wasn't just about storing crops for future use. It was also a key part of Incan rituals and religious practices. The Incas believed that food, particularly food grown by the earth, was sacred. As we've seen before, crops like maize and potatoes were seen as gifts from the gods, and the preservation of these crops had spiritual significance. The act of storing food was often accompanied by ceremonies that honored Pachamama, the earth goddess, and Inti, the sun god. These ceremonies ensured that the gods remained pleased with the harvest and that the food would remain abundant for future generations. Historians still debate whether the Incas' food preservation techniques were entirely their own invention or whether they were influenced by neighboring cultures. There's evidence that other Andean civilizations, such as the Tiwanaku and the Wari, also used drying techniques and food storage methods, so it's possible the Incas learned from these cultures. However, the scale at which the Incas perfected these methods and the way they incorporated them into their vast empire was unmatched. The preservation techniques not only allowed the Incas to feed millions of people, but also facilitated the exchange of agricultural products across their vast territory. Interestingly, modern scientists are still fascinated by the Incan methods of food preservation, particularly when it comes to the freeze-drying process used to make chuño. Researchers have been studying how the Incas managed to achieve such a sophisticated preservation method without the aid of modern technology. In some ways, the Inca freeze-drying process was far more effective than modern methods because it removed nearly all of the moisture from the potatoes, making them nearly impervious to spoilage. Some scientists even argue that the Inca technique of freeze-drying could hold valuable lessons for modern food preservation, especially in areas where refrigeration is not available. Ultimately, The Incan food preservation methods were integral to the empire's survival. They allowed the Incas to feed their people year-round, facilitate trade, and manage food supplies during times of scarcity. These techniques were not only practical, but also deeply tied to the Incan worldview, where agriculture, spirituality, and sustainability were all closely intertwined. The food preservation strategies developed by the Incas are a testament to their ingenuity and their ability to adapt to the harsh conditions of the Andes, ensuring that their empire could flourish for centuries. Let's shift gears now and talk about the intricate role of animal labor in Inca farming. While we often think of ancient agricultural societies as relying solely on human muscle to plow fields and harvest crops, the Incas were ahead of their time when it came to integrating animals into their agricultural practices. The use of animals like llamas, alpacas, and guinea pigs wasn't just a form of transportation or a source of meat. They played a vital role in ensuring the efficiency of the Incan agricultural system. Imagine yourself standing in a bustling Incan farming community. As you look around, you'll see farmers working the land, but not all of them are doing the heavy lifting on their own. Llamas, the Incas' primary pack animals, are loaded with bundles of crops or supplies, their sturdy bodies making the tough terrain of the Andes more navigable. These domesticated animals were essential for moving goods over the vast network of roads that spanned the empire, ensuring that agricultural products could be transported from the highlands to the valleys and beyond. Without the llama, the Incan road system would have been far less effective. Llamas were not just pack animals, they were also integral to the cultivation of fields. While the Incas didn't use animals for plowing like many other ancient civilizations, llamas were used to help fertilize the soil. As they traversed the fields, their droppings naturally enriched the soil, helping maintain fertility in the mountainous terrains. This natural form of fertilization reduced the need for additional labor to manage soil health, and it was a more sustainable and efficient method than relying solely on human-made compost. Llamas were also used for wool, which was highly prized for making textiles, and their meat was consumed during times of scarcity. In addition to llamas, the Incas also raised alpacas, which were prized for their fine wool. The alpacas were mainly kept for their fleece, which was used to create beautiful textiles for the elite and for ceremonial purposes. The Incan Empire was known for its high-quality textiles, which were often made from alpaca and llama wool. These textiles were not only functional, providing warmth in the cold Andean climate, but they also served as status symbols. The more finely woven the fabric, the higher the status of the wearer. The alpacas were an essential part of the Incas' economic system, and their wool contributed to the empire's trade networks. Historians still argue about the extent to which the Incas used their animals in agriculture, especially when compared to other ancient civilizations. Unlike the Egyptians, who relied heavily on oxen for plowing, the Incas didn't have the need for large-scale plowing because of their reliance on terraced farming. The steep mountain slopes they farmed on didn't require traditional plowing. Instead, the Incas used hand tools like hoes and digging sticks. Llamas, though, were instrumental in carrying tools, food, and materials, allowing workers to cover long distances without exhausting themselves. But it wasn't just the larger animals that played a part in Incan agriculture. The Incas also domesticated guinea pigs, known as cuy. These small animals were not used for labor, but were a significant part of the Incan diet. Guinea pigs were raised for their meat, which was considered a delicacy, and were also used in religious ceremonies. The presence of guinea pigs on Incan farms speaks to the diversity of animal domestication in the empire, where even smaller creatures were essential to the overall agricultural system. The use of animals in Incan agriculture is a great example of how the Incas approached farming with practicality and sustainability in mind. By incorporating animals into their agricultural practices, they not only enhanced productivity, but also contributed to the overall ecological balance. The manure of llamas and alpacas helped keep the soil fertile, while the animals themselves provided essential goods like wool and meat. This holistic approach to farming, one that took into account the needs of both the land and the animals, was a key factor in the success of the Incan agricultural system. What's fascinating is how the Incas' use of animals was also linked to their broader worldview. The Incas had a deep spiritual connection to their environment, and their animals were seen as sacred beings that played an important role in maintaining balance in the world. The llama, in particular, was associated with the mountains and the earth, and it was revered as a symbol of strength and endurance. In fact, the Incas had specific rituals and offerings dedicated to their animals, particularly before they sent llamas off on long journeys or used them in labor. This reverence for their animals reflected the Incas' broader philosophy of reciprocity with nature, where the needs of the earth and its creatures were interdependent. While the Inca Empire is often remembered for its monumental structures, military conquests, and agricultural achievements, it's easy to overlook the animals that played a key role in its success. From the sturdy llamas carrying goods across the empire's vast road network, to the alpacas providing valuable wool, animals were deeply intertwined with every aspect of Incan life. Their domestication was part of the broader agricultural system that allowed the empire to thrive in some of the harshest conditions imaginable. When we think about agriculture today, we tend to focus on machinery, technology, and chemical inputs, but the Incan model was fundamentally different. They understood the importance of animals in their agricultural systems, not just as tools for labor, but as part of a larger symbiotic relationship with the land and the people. The Incas saw farming as more than just an economic necessity. It was a way of life that was rooted in balance, sustainability, and respect for the natural world. The Inca Empire's agricultural systems were deeply intertwined with social organization. While most people think of the Incas as rulers of an empire, they were also experts at organizing their society to make the most of the land they controlled. One of the ways they did this was through the mita labor system, a complex arrangement that ensured that agricultural work was not only distributed evenly, but also that it served the broader needs of the empire. The mita system was essential for the functioning of the Inca state, particularly when it came to organizing the labor required to maintain agricultural productivity. Imagine yourself in a bustling Incan village where people are working together in harmony to tend to the terraces. Everyone has a role, and the work is shared across the community. This wasn't just a volunteer effort, it was a form of mandatory labor required by the state, but with its own checks and balances. Under the mita system, each household was responsible for providing a certain number of workers to contribute to the empire's agricultural projects. These workers, typically drawn from rural communities, would work the land or help with other agricultural tasks, such as harvesting or storing crops. In exchange for their labor, they were provided with food, clothing, and other necessities. Historians still debate the nature of the mita system, whether it was a form of taxation, a public service obligation, or something more akin to conscription. Some argue that the mita system was akin to a modern-day form of welfare, where labor was exchanged for state provisions. Others believe it was a more cooperative system, designed to ensure that every part of the empire contributed to the common good. Either way, the mita system was instrumental in organizing Inca agriculture, ensuring that the empire's agricultural infrastructure remained intact and that no area lacked the labor needed to sustain its farms. The mita system wasn't just about organizing labor for farming. It extended to other areas of the Incan economy, such as mining, construction, and military service. However, the agricultural component was perhaps the most crucial. In order for the Incas to maintain their large, centrally controlled empire, they needed a reliable workforce to tend to the fields, manage the storehouses, and perform other critical tasks. This system of shared labor helped to ensure that food was distributed evenly across the empire and that agricultural productivity remained high. Another important aspect of Incan agricultural organization was the way in which they utilized the community's collective labor for the construction and maintenance of agricultural infrastructure. The terraces we've discussed, those engineering marvels that transformed the steep mountainsides into fertile fields, were not built by a few elite engineers, but by entire communities. Workers would come together, often in a coordinated effort, to build and maintain these terraces, ensuring that the land remained productive. This communal work wasn't just about building terraces, it was about creating a sense of shared responsibility and collective ownership of the land. The Inca Empire was divided into 4 regions, or suyus, each of which had its own agricultural specialties. These regions were not only differentiated by their geography and climate, but also by the types of crops they produced. For instance, the Ceja de Montaña, the eyebrow of the mountain, was ideal for growing maize, while the high-altitude regions were perfect for potatoes and quinoa. In this sense, the Inca agricultural system was highly organized, with each region contributing what it did best to the greater whole. This regional specialization allowed the Incas to maximize the productivity of their land, and the Mita labor system helped ensure that everyone was contributing to the maintenance and expansion of this complex system. In addition to labor, the Inca Empire also had a sophisticated method for distributing food throughout the empire. Storehouses, known as colcas, were scattered across the landscape, often strategically placed near agricultural hubs. These storehouses held surplus crops, which could be distributed to different regions when needed. For example, during periods of drought or crop failure, food could be sent from the fertile valleys to the highlands, where crops had not been able to grow. This system of food distribution helped the Inca Empire withstand challenges like famine and weather-related crop failures, ensuring that the people always had access to food, no matter the circumstances. What's fascinating about the Mita system and the larger agricultural organization of the Incan Empire is the way it balanced individual contributions with the needs of the collective. People were required to work the land, but in return, they were supported by the state. It wasn't just about growing food, it was about sustaining an entire society that spanned thousands of miles across diverse climates and geographies. This sense of reciprocity, where the needs of the state were balanced with the needs of the people, was at the core of Incan agricultural policy. While the Mita system had its drawbacks, such as forcing laborers to work for the state for extended periods, it was also a key reason why the Inca were able to build and maintain such an advanced agricultural empire. They understood that the collective effort of the people was essential for the success of the entire empire, and they created systems that ensured everyone contributed to the larger agricultural economy. Interestingly, the legacy of the Mita system can still be seen in some modern agricultural communities in the Andes, where cooperative labor is still used in farming. Though these communities no longer operate under the strictures of the Inca Empire, the principles of shared labor, collective responsibility, and resource distribution have persisted for centuries, a testament to the lasting impact of Incan agricultural practices. In essence, the success of the Incan agricultural system was not just a matter of technology, irrigation, or crop selection. It was also about how the Incas organized their labor force, distributed resources, and worked together to maintain the empire's agricultural stability. The Mita system, while sometimes seen as a form of compulsory labor, played a pivotal role in ensuring that the Incan Empire could feed its vast population and maintain the intricate systems of terraces, irrigation, and crop management that were the foundation of its prosperity. Now that we've explored the intricate agricultural systems, tools, and labor structures that helped the Inca Empire thrive, let's delve into the cultural significance of agriculture in Inca society. For the Incas, farming wasn't just a means of survival, it was a deeply spiritual practice that was tightly woven into their beliefs and rituals. Agricultural cycles were seen as sacred, and the land itself was treated with reverence. The Incas viewed their connection to the earth as a divine responsibility, believing that by maintaining harmony with nature, they ensured prosperity for the empire. This spiritual connection to farming was reflected in their religious ceremonies, which celebrated the agricultural calendar and helped secure the favor of the gods. Picture yourself walking through a vast agricultural field, perhaps during the height of a religious festival. The sun is setting over the horizon, casting long shadows across the terraces. In the distance, you hear the rhythmic sounds of chanting and the clang of ritual instruments. These celebrations weren't just for the elite, they were communal affairs, with the entire population participating in ceremonies that honored the gods and the land. Agricultural festivals were held throughout the year, marking key points in the farming calendar, such as planting and harvest times. These rituals were essential for ensuring the success of the crops and maintaining the divine favor of the gods. One of the most important rituals was Inti Raymi, the festival dedicated to Inti, the sun god. This celebration, held during the winter solstice, was a major event in the Incan calendar. Inti was believed to be the giver of life and the protector of agriculture, and the festival was a way for the Incas to honor him and request his continued blessings for bountiful harvests. During the festival, sacrifices were made, typically in the form of llamas or guinea pigs, and offerings of maize, coca leaves, and other agricultural goods were presented to the gods. The entire community participated in the festival, and it was a time for the Inca people to reaffirm their connection to the land and to the divine. Another important festival was Pachamama Raymi, dedicated to Pachamama, the earth goddess. This festival, often held in the early planting season, focused on honoring the earth and ensuring a good harvest. The Incas believed that Pachamama was responsible for the fertility of the land, and they performed rituals to ask for her blessings. These included offerings of food, seeds, and sometimes even the burial of ceremonial objects. The connection between farming and spirituality was not just about keeping the gods happy. It was about maintaining a sacred balance between humans and the earth, ensuring that both prospered. What's fascinating is that the Incas didn't view these rituals and festivals as separate from their agricultural practices. They were an integral part of them. The cycles of planting and harvesting were seen as a direct reflection of the cycles of the sun and the earth. In fact, the Incas' agricultural knowledge was closely linked to their religious understanding. They based their farming techniques on the cycles of the moon and sun, believing that the phases of the moon could influence the best times to plant, harvest, and perform other agricultural tasks. This belief system helped guide the daily lives of the Inca people, ensuring that their agricultural practices were aligned with the natural rhythms of the earth. Historians still argue about how much the Incas' agricultural knowledge was influenced by religious beliefs and how much was based purely on observation and experience. Some scholars suggest that the Incan understanding of the earth and its agricultural cycles was purely empirical, based on centuries of careful study of the environment. Others argue that the Inca were deeply religious and their farming practices were guided by spiritual beliefs. Either way, it's clear that agriculture was not simply about growing food. It was about sustaining life in the most holistic sense possible, maintaining a balance between the physical and the spiritual. One of the most symbolic agricultural rituals was Waka ceremony, where the Incas would make offerings to the sacred shrines, or wakas, that marked important agricultural areas. These shrines were often located in fields or at the base of mountains, and the offerings made there were thought to ensure the fertility of the land. Rituals at these sacred sites were typically held before and after planting, and they involved sacrifices of food, textiles, and occasionally animals. The Waka rituals reinforced the idea that farming was a sacred task, one that required the favor of the gods to be successful. In addition to the Waka and Inti Raymi rituals, the Incas also practiced divination, or the interpretation of signs from the gods. Priests would interpret the movement of the stars, the flight of birds, and even the growth of plants to determine the best time for planting and harvesting. They believed that the gods communicated with them through these natural signs, and the careful observance of these signs was crucial for the success of their crops. This spiritual connection to agriculture was central to the Incan worldview, and it influenced every aspect of their farming practices. While modern agriculture focuses primarily on efficiency and productivity, the Incan approach was much more holistic. Their farming practices were about balance, balancing the needs of the earth with the needs of the people, balancing human labor with animal contributions, and balancing the physical with the spiritual. It was a system where every crop, every tool, and every laborer had a purpose, all in service of maintaining harmony with the world around them. In a way, the Inca agricultural system was a reflection of their entire civilization. It wasn't just about feeding the empire. It was about honoring the earth, the gods, and the cycles of nature that govern their lives. The respect and reverence that the Incas showed for their agricultural practices are part of what made their civilization so enduring. Even after the fall of the Inca Empire, the deep respect for the land and its cycles remained an integral part of Andean culture, continuing to influence farming practices in the region for centuries. As we continue our journey through the Incan agricultural marvels, let's turn our attention to one of the more subtle yet profoundly impactful aspects of their system, the management of their food storage. The Incas were not only brilliant at growing and preserving food, but they also developed highly sophisticated methods for storing it. These techniques helped safeguard the empire's food supply against natural disasters, famines, and even political unrest, ensuring that the vast Incan population could be fed year-round. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of an Incan storage facility, a coca. These circular stone structures were scattered across the empire, from the valleys of the Andean highlands to the lowlands of the coast. Some were even built into mountainsides, where they took advantage of the natural coolness of the rock to keep stored foods from spoiling. Inside these storage houses, you would find a bounty of agricultural products, dried maize, potatoes, quinoa, and other crops carefully arranged to ensure their preservation. Some of these colcas were large enough to hold enough food to feed thousands of people, making them an essential part of the Incas' ability to feed their empire. The Inca used these food storage facilities in a way that was both efficient and strategic. By placing the colcas in various regions across the empire, the Incas ensured that food could be stored near the places where it was needed most. These storerooms were typically located near agricultural hubs, such as fertile valleys or areas of abundant harvest, allowing for easy transportation and distribution of food when required. During times of scarcity, whether due to natural disasters like droughts or floods, or political unrest, the colcas provided a safety net, ensuring that supplies could be moved to areas in need. Historians are still fascinated by the level of organization that the Incas maintained in their food storage systems. Each colca was carefully stocked with specific types of food, with the contents being rotated to ensure that older food was used first. This practice helped prevent spoilage and kept the supplies fresh. The Incas also employed a system of regular inspections to make sure the food was being stored properly, and they took special care to ensure that each food type was stored in the right conditions. For example, grains like maize and quinoa were stored in dry conditions to prevent rot, while potatoes and other tubers were kept cool and away from light. One particularly impressive feature of the colca system was its flexibility. The Incas didn't just store food for the people. They also used these storerooms as part of their complex system of tribute. As we've seen before, the mita labor system required people to work on agricultural projects and provide food to the state as a form of tribute. The food that was collected through this system was stored in colcas and could then be redistributed to different regions, ensuring that no one went hungry, regardless of the harvest's success or failure in any given year. The colca storage system wasn't just a model of efficiency, it was also a model of sustainability. By carefully storing surplus food, the Incas ensured that they could withstand bad years and maintain a steady food supply even when the environment wasn't cooperating. This allowed the empire to support large armies, maintain administrative structures, and provide for its people, no matter what challenges arose. It was a key factor in the empire's resilience, making it one of the most successful and long-lasting civilizations in history. Another aspect of Inca food storage that deserves attention is their use of natural refrigeration. In the high-altitude areas of the Andes, where temperatures could dip below freezing at night, the Incas took advantage of the cold climate to preserve food. Foods like chuño, freeze-dried potatoes, would be laid out in the open air, allowing the cold nighttime temperatures to freeze the crops, while the daytime heat helped to dry them out. This freeze-thaw cycle not only preserved the food, but also made it easier to store and transport. The Incas' ability to preserve food in such a simple, natural way was a significant achievement, especially considering the lack of modern refrigeration methods. While food storage was certainly practical, it also had a cultural significance. The process of collecting and storing food was deeply tied to the Incan worldview of reciprocity. The Incas believed that the earth, represented by Pachamama, provided the food, and it was the people's responsibility to honor that gift by ensuring that it was properly stored and distributed. The process of storing food in Calcacas was not just about practical survival. It was also an act of reverence for the earth's bounty and the gods' blessings. The Calca system was an integral part of the Incan state's ability to maintain control over its vast territory. It allowed the empire to create a stable food supply, even in areas that were not immediately productive or were prone to environmental challenges. The careful management of food stores helped sustain the empire for centuries, enabling the Incas to feed millions of people across a vast and varied landscape. Today, the legacy of the Incan storage systems lives on in modern food preservation practices. The principles of efficient storage, regular inspections, and the importance of food security are all part of contemporary agricultural systems, though we now rely on refrigeration, canning, and other technologies. But in many ways, the Colca system was ahead of its time, proving that with a deep understanding of the environment and an efficient organizational system, food can be preserved, distributed, and safeguarded for future generations. While the Inca Empire is often remembered for its grand terraces and intricate irrigation systems, there was one crucial aspect of their farming methods that often gets overlooked: their ability to grow crops in the most unlikely of places: deserts. Yes, deserts. Despite the seemingly barren nature of the landscape, the Incas found a way to transform dry, arid regions into productive farmlands, and in doing so, they demonstrated just how resourceful and adaptive they were when faced with difficult challenges. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a dry, dusty desert. The heat waves shimmer off the ground, and the soil looks cracked and lifeless. But then you notice something unusual. Small terraces, neat and green, stretching up the hillsides, each one carefully irrigated, each one thriving with crops. It's hard to believe that anything could survive in such a harsh environment, yet the Incas figured out how to make it work. One of the most remarkable places the Incas cultivated crops was in the coastal deserts of modern-day Peru. These deserts are notorious for their extreme lack of rainfall. Some areas receive less than half an inch of rain per year. Yet the Incas, through their innovative agricultural methods, managed to transform these dry regions into thriving agricultural hubs. This was no small feat. The Incas didn't have the benefit of modern irrigation systems or machinery, yet they succeeded in creating productive farmlands where few believed it was possible. The key to their success was the sophisticated system of irrigation they developed. The Incas built complex networks of aqueducts and canals to channel water from nearby rivers or underground reservoirs into their fields. These canals were meticulously designed to carry water across vast distances, allowing them to irrigate crops in places that otherwise wouldn't support any agriculture. The most famous example of this is the irrigation system in the Nazca region, where the Incas used underground aqueducts known as puquillos. These aqueducts tapped into underground water sources and carried water to the surface, where it was used to irrigate crops in the desert. In addition to this clever use of water, the Incas also took advantage of natural geography. In some desert regions, they built small, elevated terraces to catch the morning dew, which provided a minimal but essential water supply for the crops. These terraces allowed them to take advantage of moisture in the air, even if rainfall was scarce. By carefully managing water resources and optimizing the use of natural elements like dew and runoff, the Incas were able to grow crops like maize, cotton, and beans in the desert. But the Incas didn't just rely on their ingenuity in irrigation. They also made the most of the local environment by choosing crops that were well suited to desert conditions. They were selective in the types of plants they grew, focusing on those that could survive in arid conditions. For example, the Incas cultivated varieties of maize that were drought resistant, and they focused on growing cotton, which thrived in the heat and could be used for textiles. They also grew crops like quinoa and amaranth, which are hardy and can survive in poor soils and extreme weather conditions. What's especially fascinating is how the Incas integrated this desert agriculture with their broader agricultural system. The desert regions they cultivated were not isolated. They were part of a larger network of agricultural zones across the empire. The Incas carefully coordinated their crops across different regions, with each area contributing its strengths to the overall agricultural system. The desert areas, with their unique crops, fed into the larger food distribution network that helped sustain the empire. Historians still argue about the specific methods the Incas used to make desert agriculture so successful, and while some details remain a mystery, the results are undeniable. The Incas' ability to transform arid land into productive farmland helped ensure the success of their empire for centuries. These farming practices were not only a testament to their ingenuity, but also to their deep understanding of the environment and their ability to adapt their methods to fit the challenges they faced. The Incas' desert agriculture also had a cultural and economic significance. For one, it helped create a surplus of cotton, which was a vital resource for textiles. Cotton was highly prized in the Inca Empire, and it was used to make clothing, blankets, and ceremonial items. The abundance of cotton in desert regions allowed the Incas to develop a thriving textile industry, which was an important part of their economy. The textiles produced from this cotton were often used as tribute, traded with neighboring cultures, or distributed as gifts from the Inca rulers to their subjects. The success of Incan desert agriculture also allowed them to expand their reach into new territories. By demonstrating that even the most arid areas could be turned into productive farmlands, the Incas were able to establish settlements in regions that would have been deemed inhospitable by other civilizations. This helped them solidify their control over vast and varied lands, stretching from the coastal deserts to the high mountain ranges. What is truly remarkable about Incan desert farming is how it serves as a model for sustainable agriculture today. The careful management of water resources, the selection of drought-resistant crops, and the efficient use of local resources are practices that are still highly relevant in modern farming, especially in areas that face similar environmental challenges. In fact, modern agricultural scientists have studied Incan desert farming techniques to learn how they might be applied to contemporary water-scarce regions. The Incas, through their remarkable agricultural innovations, not only proved that farming could thrive in the desert, but also showed that with careful planning, knowledge, and respect for the environment, even the harshest landscapes could be transformed into productive lands. Their success in desert agriculture stands as one of the many impressive achievements of their empire, a testament to their ingenuity, adaptability, and deep connection to the land. We've explored the marvels of Inca agriculture in the highlands and the desert, but now let's turn our attention to the methods they used to grow crops in areas that were more prone to flooding. While many would think that farming in a flood-prone area would be a disaster waiting to happen, the Incas found a way to make the most of the natural cycles of water. Through ingenuity and careful planning, they developed agricultural techniques that allowed them to harness the water while minimizing the risks it posed. Imagine standing near the edge of a river that overflows its banks every rainy season. The ground is wet and muddy, and the constant flooding has rendered the soil nearly impossible to farm. But as you look closer, you notice rows of crops growing in neatly organized plots, rows of maize, quinoa, and beans, all thriving despite the wet conditions. How did the Incas manage to grow crops in such flood-prone areas? The answer lies in the concept of camelones, raised fields that the Incas developed to deal with flooding. These raised platforms were built above the level of the floodwaters, with channels running between them to carry away excess water. The raised fields allowed the Incas to take advantage of the nutrient-rich silt left behind by the floods, turning areas that were normally unsuitable for farming into fertile agricultural zones. By elevating the soil, the Incas ensured that their crops wouldn't be drowned during the rainy season, while still benefiting from the irrigation brought by the flooding. The camelones weren't just functional. They were carefully designed to optimize water management. Channels between the raised fields would allow for excess water to drain off, preventing crops from being waterlogged, while still maintaining a steady supply of moisture. In these areas, the Incas were able to grow a variety of crops that would not have thrived without this innovative approach. This method was especially useful in the lowland valleys, where the risk of flooding was high, but the potential for fertile soil was equally great. What makes camelones particularly remarkable is that they were created with the understanding of natural cycles. The Incas knew that flooding, while potentially dangerous, could also be a boon for agriculture. When rivers overflowed, they deposited nutrient-rich silt on the land, making it ideal for farming. However, if the water wasn't managed properly, it could destroy crops. By raising the soil and designing irrigation channels, the Incas were able to harness the benefits of flooding without suffering the drawbacks. This clever method not only allowed them to grow more food, but also helped conserve the fertility of the land for future generations. Historians still argue about the exact timeline and geographic scope of camelones' construction, but there's no doubt that the technique was widely used by the Incas in the lowland valleys of the Andes, particularly in regions like the Sacred Valley of the Incas. The system was highly effective in these areas, where the land was prone to seasonal floods from the nearby rivers. It also demonstrates the deep knowledge the Incas had of their environment, as they knew that by adapting their farming methods to the landscape, they could not only survive, but thrive in challenging conditions. The success of the camelone system is also a testament to the importance of water management in Incan agriculture. We've already seen how the Incas controlled water in the highlands with terraces and irrigation systems, but they also knew how to manage it in areas prone to floods. Their mastery of water control was a critical part of their agricultural success, enabling them to cultivate vast amounts of food across a diverse range of landscapes. The Incas were able to grow crops in environments that others would have written off as uninhabitable, and their knowledge of water management played a key role in this. Interestingly, the camelone system also had a positive impact on local biodiversity. The fertile, well-irrigated soil created by the raised fields allowed for a greater variety of crops to be grown in one area. The Incas used camelones not just for the staples of their diet, but also to cultivate crops that were important for medicinal or ceremonial purposes. The biodiversity supported by these systems helped ensure that the Incas had access to a wide variety of foods, medicines, and materials, contributing to both the health and the cultural richness of their society. Modern researchers have studied the ancient camelone systems, and in some places, efforts have been made to revive this technique in areas with similar flooding problems. The agricultural challenges faced by the Incas in these flood-prone areas are not unlike the challenges faced by farmers today, especially in areas prone to climate-induced flooding. The revival of raised fields could provide solutions for sustainable farming in flood-prone regions, as they offer a way to harness water without the risk of crops being washed away. The Incan ability to adapt to the flooding environment is a prime example of their broader agricultural philosophy. Rather than fighting nature, they worked with it. They saw the potential of the land, even in places that seemed unfit for farming, and found ways to unlock that potential. This philosophy of adaptation and respect for the natural environment was not only practical, but deeply rooted in their spiritual beliefs. For the Incas, agriculture wasn't just about growing food, it was about maintaining balance with the earth and its cycles. Their farming systems, including the camelones of the lowland valleys, were a reflection of this holistic worldview. The ingenuity of the camelone system, combined with the Incas' broader knowledge of water management and soil fertility, allowed them to grow crops in some of the most challenging environments imaginable. Their ability to work with flooding rather than against it demonstrates the Incas' profound understanding of the natural world and their innovative approach to agriculture. Their methods are not just historical curiosities, they are valuable lessons in sustainable farming that can still be applied today. So far, we've seen how the Incas used innovative farming techniques in a range of environments, from the high altitudes to the deserts and floodplains. But the agricultural system that supported the entire empire wasn't just about mastering the land. It was also about cultivating a vast, intricate network of agricultural knowledge that spanned across the entire empire. The Inca Empire was incredibly diverse, with people living in vastly different ecological zones, and the key to the empire's agricultural success lay in the exchange of knowledge between regions. Imagine yourself traveling from one region to another within the Inca Empire. You start in the high-altitude plateaus, where crops like potatoes and quinoa thrive. As you descend into the valleys, the climate warms, and you begin to see fields of maize and coca. Along the way, you notice that every region seems to have its own unique set of crops and farming practices. This wasn't just by chance, it was a product of a carefully curated system that allowed the Incas to share agricultural knowledge and innovations across their vast empire. One of the greatest achievements of the Inca agricultural system was the creation of a network of agricultural specialists and experts who could share knowledge and ensure that farming methods suited the unique conditions of each region. This system of knowledge exchange was facilitated by the Incas' extensive road network, which allowed for the rapid movement of people, goods, and ideas. The roads not only connect the farthest reaches of the empire, but also served as conduits for agricultural innovation. This exchange of agricultural knowledge was especially important because the Incas did not have a centralized bureaucracy to control farming methods. Instead, local agricultural specialists, often appointed by the state, were responsible for overseeing farming practices in their regions. These specialists were selected based on their expertise in dealing with specific crops or conditions, whether that was managing irrigation in dry areas or developing specialized techniques for farming at high altitudes. This decentralization allowed for the continuous development and adaptation of agricultural practices to meet the changing needs of different regions within the empire. In each region, local farmers would experiment with new crops, tools, and techniques, and these innovations would be shared with other regions through the Incas' vast communication system. For example, it's likely that the methods used to cultivate crops in the high Andes, such as the terracing and use of microclimates, were shared with other regions where similar methods could be adapted for different crops. Similarly, farming techniques developed in the coastal deserts to manage water and grow cotton would have influenced the agricultural practices in other areas with limited water resources. This exchange wasn't just about learning from each other, it was also about survival. The Inca Empire was spread across a wide variety of climates and elevations, which meant that farming techniques had to be adapted to the specific needs of each region. One area might struggle with drought, while another was plagued by frost, and the agricultural specialists had to develop region-specific solutions. The success of the Incan agricultural system lay in this adaptability and the willingness to learn from one another. A key part of this knowledge-sharing system was the role of state-run agricultural experiments. The Incas, understanding the value of continual agricultural improvement, ran state-sponsored farms that tested new crops, irrigation techniques, and soil treatments. These experimental farms were located in various regions and were used to train agricultural specialists who would then take their newfound knowledge back to their communities. Through this system, the Inca were able to optimize food production, ensuring that no area in the empire would fall behind in agricultural innovation. An interesting facet of this knowledge exchange was how the Incas utilized the vast array of crops found across their empire. While some crops were grown exclusively in certain regions, such as maize in the lowland valleys and potatoes in the highlands, the Incas exchanged crops across regions to ensure that all areas of the empire had access to a diverse range of food. For example, the high-altitude regions were often supplied with maize, which grew better in the warmer valleys, and the lowlands received quinoa and potatoes that were grown in the cold, fertile highlands. This created a truly interconnected agricultural system that allowed the empire to thrive and ensure food security across its vast territories. Another important part of the agricultural exchange was the quipu, a system of knotted cords used by the Incas to record information. While the quipu is often associated with record keeping and census data, it also played a role in agricultural administration. The Incas used the quipu to keep track of the state's agricultural output, manage storage supplies, and ensure that crops were distributed evenly across the empire. By recording data on crop yields and labor allocation, the Incas were able to fine-tune their agricultural systems and quickly respond to changing conditions. The exchange of agricultural knowledge between regions also fostered a sense of shared responsibility. Farmers in each region knew that their efforts were part of a larger empire-wide system. They weren't just growing food for themselves or their local community. They were contributing to the success of the entire empire. This sense of collective effort helped bind the Inca Empire together, creating a unified, self-sustaining agricultural network that supported not just the needs of the population, but also the empire's political, military, and religious structures. What stands out about the Inca's agricultural knowledge exchange system is how it was designed to adapt and evolve. The empire didn't simply impose a set of agricultural practices on its people. It created a system that was flexible, decentralized, and responsive to local needs. This flexibility allowed the Incas to thrive in one of the most ecologically diverse regions on Earth, from the high Andean mountains to the arid deserts of the coast, and from the lush tropical jungles of the Amazon to the fertile valleys in between. In many ways, the Incan approach to agriculture was a model for sustainable farming practices. The empire's ability to balance ecological considerations, agricultural needs, and knowledge sharing made it one of the most advanced agricultural systems in pre-Columbian history. Today, as we face our own environmental and agricultural challenges, we can look to the Inca as an example of how a society can thrive by working with nature, learning from one another, and adapting to the changing world around them. As we've explored the complexity and sophistication of the Inca Empire's agricultural systems, it's clear that their methods were not just innovative for their time, they were foundational to the empire's long-lasting success. But like all great civilizations, the Incas eventually faced challenges that threatened their carefully cultivated systems. One of the most significant events in Inca history was the arrival of the Spanish conquistadors in the early 16th century. Their conquest of the Inca Empire drastically altered not only the political landscape of the region, but also the agricultural systems that had sustained the empire for centuries. Imagine yourself standing in the heart of the Inca Empire just before the Spanish arrived. The land is fertile, the roads are bustling with trade, and the crops are abundant. Farmers in the highlands, valleys, and deserts have spent generations perfecting their agricultural techniques, and the empire's vast network of food stores ensures that everyone is fed, even in times of hardship. But then, from across the ocean come the Spanish explorers, armed with weapons and intentions of conquest. The once thriving Inca Empire is about to change forever. When the Spanish arrived in the early 1500s, led by figures like Francisco Pizarro, the empire was at its peak. The Incas had mastered a system of sustainable farming that fed millions, and their ability to manage the land was unmatched. However, the Spanish brought with them diseases, new technologies, and most crucially, a mindset that often saw Incan practices as primitive or backward. The Spanish saw the Incas' agricultural innovations, such as their advanced irrigation systems, crop diversity, and sophisticated storage techniques, as primitive and ineffective in comparison to European farming methods, which led to the disruption of these practices. The first major blow to the Inca agricultural system came in the form of disease. Smallpox, influenza, and other European diseases were introduced by the Spanish, devastating the Inca population. Entire communities were wiped out, and much of the labor force that had maintained the agricultural system was lost. The Mita labor system, which relied on a strong workforce of farmers, miners, and builders, became severely strained as populations plummeted. The death toll from these diseases is estimated to be in the millions, and it left the Incas unable to maintain their agricultural projects at the same scale. Along with the devastating impact of disease, the Spanish also imposed their own economic system, which disrupted the intricate networks of labor and food distribution that had sustained the empire. The Spanish colonizers exploited the land, introducing European crops and livestock that often competed with or replaced the native Incan varieties. Crops such as wheat, barley, and sugarcane were introduced to the highlands, and the livestock, mainly horses, cattle, and sheep, changed the dynamics of Incan farming. While the Incas had domesticated animals like llamas and alpacas for their labor and wool, the Spanish brought animals that were used primarily for meat and leather. The introduction of these new species altered the balance of local ecosystems and had a long-term impact on Incan farming practices. In addition to the biological and agricultural disruptions, the Spanish also imposed a system of land distribution and agricultural practices that favored European methods over traditional Inca practices. Large estates, known as haciendas, were established, and the indigenous population was often forced to work these estates under harsh conditions. This new system of agriculture, focused on cash crops like sugar and tobacco, was radically different from the Incas' holistic and sustainable agricultural methods. The traditional Incan approach to farming, which had prioritized community, reciprocity, and sustainability, was undermined by the colonial economy, which favored profit and exploitation. One of the most significant losses for Incan agriculture came with the dismantling of the colca storage system. Under the Spanish, many of the state-run storehouses were repurposed or abandoned, and food distribution networks became less efficient. With the fall of the Inca Empire, the centralized management of food supplies and agricultural products collapsed, and much of the sophisticated knowledge of farming practices, especially regarding water management and crop storage, was lost or forgotten. However, despite the tremendous impact of Spanish colonization, many aspects of Incan agriculture did survive, albeit in a transformed context. Some agricultural methods were adapted and integrated into colonial farming systems, and elements of Incan farming practices were passed down to future generations. For example, the potato, a staple crop of the Incas, would go on to spread across the world, becoming a key food source in Europe and beyond. Many of the indigenous agricultural techniques, particularly those related to soil management, irrigation, and terracing, continued to influence farming practices in the Andes long after the fall of the Inca Empire. In addition, certain Andean communities continued to cultivate traditional crops like quinoa, maize, and potatoes, albeit under new political and economic systems. The ancient techniques of chuño production, the use of terraces, and even the camelones in flood-prone areas were maintained by indigenous communities who kept these practices alive in spite of colonial pressures. In some cases, the resilience of these farming methods helped indigenous populations survive the harsh realities of Spanish rule. Historians still debate the full extent to which Incan agricultural methods were preserved and how the Spanish conquest altered the landscape of Andean farming. But what is clear is that, while much of the Inca agricultural system was disrupted, elements of it continued to thrive, even as the empire collapsed. The deep knowledge of the land, water, and crops that the Incas had cultivated over centuries was not easily erased. In many ways, the agricultural legacy of the Inca Empire lives on in the farming communities of the Andes, where ancient methods continue to be practiced alongside modern techniques. The fall of the Inca Empire is often seen as a tragic event in history, and while the agricultural system that sustained the empire was forever altered, the enduring legacy of Inca agriculture is a testament to the resilience and innovation of their people. The Incas, with their mastery over the land and crops, left an indelible mark on the agricultural world, and their methods continue to inspire sustainable farming practices in the modern world. As we reflect on the aftermath of the Inca Empire's collapse, it's impossible to ignore the lasting influence of their agricultural techniques on modern-day farming practices. While the empire may have fallen to foreign conquest and disease, the lessons of the Incan agricultural system did not disappear entirely. In fact, many of the innovative methods developed by the Incas continue to shape farming today, especially in regions where sustainability and environmental challenges are a major concern. The Incas were, in many ways, ahead of their time, and their approach to agriculture provides valuable insights into how societies can grow food sustainably and harmoniously with the land. One of the most significant contributions the Incas made to modern agriculture is their use of terracing. These stepped fields, carved into the mountainsides of the Andes, allowed the Incas to turn steep, otherwise unusable land into productive farming space. Today, terracing is still used in many parts of the world, particularly in regions with challenging terrain. The method not only maximized arable land, but also prevented soil erosion, a practice that is just as relevant in modern sustainable farming as it was in ancient times. Terracing helps to retain water, control runoff, and create microclimates that support diverse crops, methods that are increasingly important as farmers contend with the effects of climate change. In regions of the Andes, particularly in Peru and Ecuador, traditional Incan farming methods, including the use of terraces, are still practiced. These farming systems have been passed down through generations, and many indigenous communities continue to use the knowledge that was once central to the Inca Empire. The Incas' deep understanding of local climates, soils, and water management allowed them to grow a variety of crops at different altitudes and in different environmental conditions. Today, as modern agriculture faces growing pressures from global warming and shifting weather patterns, many of these ancient methods are being revisited for their sustainability and resilience. The Incas were also masters of crop rotation, a technique that modern scientists now recognize as an essential part of sustainable farming. Crop rotation prevents soil depletion, helps maintain soil fertility, and reduces the risk of pests and diseases. The Incas' practice of rotating crops, alternating between different types of plants, including potatoes, maize, quinoa, and beans, allowed them to keep their soil healthy and productive over the long term. This method is a cornerstone of modern sustainable agriculture, and the lessons from the Inca are still relevant to today's farmers as they work to protect and replenish the Earth's precious soil. The Incas also relied on organic farming techniques, using natural fertilizers like animal manure and compost to enrich the soil. Their use of llama and alpaca dung to fertilize fields is a technique that, while common today, was revolutionary at the time. The Incas' ability to work with organic materials and natural resources to sustain their agricultural systems is an important lesson in the face of modern farming's over-reliance on synthetic chemicals and fertilizers. As we face challenges like soil degradation, water scarcity, and the environmental impacts of industrial agriculture, the Incan methods of farming provide a compelling alternative that emphasizes ecological balance and resource conservation. In addition to their agricultural practices, the Incas also had a profound understanding of water management. Their complex system of irrigation channels, aqueducts, and reservoirs allowed them to transport water to where it was needed most, even in the dry desert regions. Today, we are seeing the importance of water conservation and efficient irrigation in agriculture. As global water supplies become increasingly strained, the Incan approach to managing water resources, using both natural and engineered systems, is a model for sustainable water use. Their ability to balance the needs of agriculture with the available water supply is a lesson that modern civilizations must take to heart as they develop more resilient systems for farming in water-scarce regions. One of the most striking aspects of Incan agriculture was their approach to biodiversity. The Incas grew hundreds of different varieties of crops across their empire, ensuring a varied and healthy diet for the people. By cultivating diverse crops, the Incas reduced the risk of famine and crop failure, and they made their agricultural system more adaptable to changing environmental conditions. The practice of growing diverse crops continues to be a key principle in modern permaculture and sustainable farming. It's a direct response to the dangers of monocropping, where growing the same crop repeatedly on the same land can deplete the soil and increase vulnerability to pests and diseases. The Incas also emphasized the spiritual and cultural importance of agriculture. For the Incas, farming was not just about feeding the empire, it was an act of reciprocity with the earth. Their connection to the land, the gods, and the cycles of nature was central to their agricultural practices. The rituals and ceremonies that surrounded planting, harvesting, and other agricultural activities underscored the sacred nature of farming. This respect for the land and its resources is something that modern agriculture can learn from. In an era where industrial farming practices often prioritize profit over environmental and social well-being, the Incas' deep spiritual connection to their land offers a refreshing reminder of the importance of sustainable, respectful farming. The Inca Empire's agricultural legacy continues to influence the way we think about farming today. As global agriculture faces increasing pressure from climate change, soil degradation, and water scarcity, the ancient techniques developed by the Incas offer invaluable lessons in sustainability and resilience. Whether it's through the use of terraces, crop rotation, organic fertilizers, or water management systems, the Incan approach to agriculture provides a model for how societies can work with the land rather than against it. In modern times, there is a growing movement to integrate traditional farming methods with contemporary knowledge. Across the world, farmers are turning to ancient practices, including those of the Incas, as a way to combat environmental challenges and create more sustainable agricultural systems. By combining the wisdom of the past with modern technology, we have the opportunity to build a future where farming is more sustainable, equitable, and in harmony with the environment. The Incan legacy offers a blueprint for how we can live in balance with the land, and it's a legacy that continues to inspire and guide us in the pursuit of a more sustainable agricultural future. As we reflect on the incredible agricultural practices of the Inca Empire, it's important to consider how their methods not only impacted their own civilization, but also contributed to global agriculture. The Incas were not only skilled in the art of farming, but they were also innovative in the way they shared their agricultural knowledge with neighboring peoples and beyond. Their agricultural legacy would eventually spread to other parts of South America and the world, influencing farming practices far beyond the Andean mountains. Let's consider the most profound global impact of Incan agriculture, the potato. Today, the potato is one of the most widely consumed crops in the world, but few people realize that its roots are firmly planted in the soil of the Andes, nurtured by the ancient Incas. Potatoes were not just a staple food for the Incas. They were a key to their survival. With thousands of different varieties cultivated in the highlands, the Incas created a resilient food source that could thrive at high altitudes, in harsh conditions, and across a variety of microclimates. This diversity in potatoes allowed the Incas to ensure a steady food supply, even when other crops failed due to weather extremes. The Spanish, upon arriving in South America, recognized the potato's potential and took it back to Europe. The crop quickly spread across the continent, and by the 18th century, it had become a staple food in many countries. The adaptability of the potato, along with its nutritional density, made it an ideal crop for feeding growing populations. Its role in Europe's agricultural revolution is often credited with helping to prevent famine and sustain populations during difficult periods. Today, the potato is grown on every continent and has become a crucial food source in global agriculture. Beyond potatoes, the Incas' agricultural knowledge also extended to other crops that have had a lasting global impact. Quinoa, a highly nutritious grain that the Incas revered for its protein content, has become increasingly popular in recent years due to its health benefits. Quinoa was not only an essential part of the Incan diet, but also a sacred crop tied to their religious practices. After centuries of being cultivated in the Andes, quinoa has now found its place in kitchens around the world, thanks to its gluten-free nature and versatility. Maize, another key crop in the Inca Empire, also made its way to other parts of the world. While maize was already being cultivated by indigenous cultures in North America, the widespread cultivation of maize was amplified by the Spanish, who brought it back to Europe, where it became an important crop in southern Europe and parts of Africa. Today, maize is a global crop used in everything from food products to biofuels. The Incas were also instrumental in the development of cotton as an agricultural product. The fine quality cotton that grew in the warm, coastal regions of the empire became a valuable trade commodity. Inca textiles, woven from this cotton, were prized for their durability and intricate patterns. Cotton farming and textile production have, of course, spread globally over time, with the knowledge of how to cultivate and process cotton being passed down through generations. The Incas' contribution to global textile industries cannot be understated, as the fibers they cultivated formed the basis for one of the world's largest industries today. Even in their methods of food preservation, the Incas' innovations still influence modern agriculture. The chuño process, which involved freeze-drying potatoes, was a groundbreaking method of food preservation that allowed the Incas to store and transport food over long distances and throughout the year. Today, freeze-drying is used in modern food industries for everything from military rations to freeze-dried fruits and vegetables. The Incas' understanding of how to preserve food for long periods is now considered a vital practice in addressing global food security, especially in regions where refrigeration is not widely available. But it's not just the crops that have left their mark on modern agriculture. It's the Incan agricultural philosophy. The Incas saw farming not only as a means of survival, but as a deeply spiritual practice. Their reverence for Pachamama, the earth goddess, and their belief in reciprocity with the land set the foundation for sustainable farming practices that can still be applied today. The Incas' holistic view of agriculture, where every aspect of farming, from soil health to crop rotation, was interconnected, resonates with modern movements focused on sustainability, permaculture, and organic farming. Modern agriculturalists and environmentalists increasingly look back at ancient agricultural systems, including that of the Incas, to find ways to solve contemporary farming challenges. As the world grapples with issues like climate change, soil erosion, and the depletion of water resources, the Incan system of sustainable farming practices, like the use of terraces, crop rotation, and organic fertilizers, offers valuable insights. The Incas' approach to farming, based on working with the land rather than exploiting it, is a model for how modern agriculture can evolve to meet the challenges of the future. Interestingly, in some areas of the Andes today, communities continue to practice traditional Incan farming techniques, sometimes in combination with modern methods. Indigenous farmers in these regions often employ the use of terraces and natural fertilizers, growing native crops like potatoes and quinoa, and adapting their farming practices to the changing environmental conditions. This blending of ancient knowledge and contemporary agricultural techniques is a testament to the enduring legacy of the Incas and their deep understanding of the land. In a broader sense, the Incan agricultural legacy is not just about food production. It's about fostering a relationship with nature that prioritizes balance, sustainability, and respect. This worldview, deeply embedded in Incan society, has the power to influence how we approach farming and the environment today. By learning from the Incas' integrated approach to farming, we can create a future where agriculture sustains not just human populations, but also the planet itself. The Inca Empire, though long gone, continues to shape our world today in ways that we may not always recognize. From the crops they cultivated to the techniques they developed, their influence stretches far beyond the Andes and lives on in global agriculture. The enduring impact of Incan agricultural practices is a testament to their ingenuity, resourcefulness, and deep respect for the natural world, a legacy that we can learn from as we move toward a more sustainable future. As we continue to explore the far-reaching impact of Incan agriculture, it's essential to reflect on how the agricultural knowledge of the Incas didn't just survive conquest and colonization. It evolved and adapted, influencing modern global practices in unexpected ways. The Incan Empire's agricultural legacy is not only reflected in their ancient farming techniques, but also in the cultural and social practices that arose out of their agricultural systems. These systems shaped the way their descendants interacted with the land, food, and each other. And many of these traditions continue to inform local farming communities in the Andes today. Imagine walking through a small Andean village in the present day, where the air is thin and the mountains loom high above. You might encounter farmers who, despite the challenges of modern life, continue to use many of the same agricultural techniques the Incas developed centuries ago. The knowledge of terracing, soil preservation, and crop diversity has been passed down through generations, and these practices remain deeply ingrained in the culture of these rural communities. Even as modern agricultural technology has advanced in many areas of the world, in the Andean highlands, the old ways persist. Farmers continue to work the land with a deep understanding of the soil and the seasons, much like their Inca ancestors. They still use organic fertilizers, including the dung of llamas and alpacas, to enrich the soil. The ancient terraces, built by the Incas, are still in use today, though often without the modern machinery that has transformed farming in other parts of the world. Instead, farmers here use traditional hand tools to tend to the land, working in harmony with the environment rather than trying to overpower it. This continuity of traditional farming practices isn't just a relic of the past, it's a testament to the lasting relevance of the Inca approach to agriculture. In many ways, these agricultural methods have proven to be more sustainable and resilient than the industrial farming systems that dominate much of the world today. The Incas' commitment to maintaining biodiversity, conserving soil, and working with natural cycles of the land continues to resonate with modern movements focused on sustainable farming and food security. In fact, the Incas' agricultural practices are increasingly recognized as examples of permaculture, an agricultural philosophy that emphasizes working with nature, not against it. Permaculture, a movement that has gained traction globally, emphasizes the importance of sustainability, biodiversity, and soil health, all principles that the Incas practiced. By observing natural ecosystems and mimicking their processes, permaculture aims to create systems that are self-sustaining and resilient, much like the agricultural systems the Incas developed to thrive in the harsh conditions of the Andes. But it isn't just the crops and farming techniques that continue to resonate with modern agricultural systems. The Incan approach to water management offers valuable lessons for today's world. In the face of climate change, where droughts and water scarcity are becoming increasingly prevalent, the Incas' ingenious water management systems are more relevant than ever. Their knowledge of microclimates, the creation of irrigation canals and terraces, and the management of water resources in arid regions is an inspiration to modern engineers and farmers alike. One example of this influence is the modern practice of drip irrigation, which has been adapted from ancient methods of water distribution. The Incas were pioneers in the use of gravity-fed irrigation systems, carefully designed to deliver water evenly to crops while conserving precious resources. Today, drip irrigation systems, which use a network of tubes and emitters to deliver water directly to the roots of plants, are employed to reduce water waste and increase efficiency. The principles behind these modern irrigation systems are rooted in ancient practices like those used by the Incas. Moreover, the Incas' deep respect for the earth and their belief in reciprocity with nature can offer a much-needed perspective in today's agricultural debate. The Incas understood that farming wasn't just about taking from the land, it was about giving back. They made efforts to restore and maintain the fertility of the soil, knowing that the earth's resources were finite and that careful stewardship was required for the long-term success of agriculture. Today, as we face challenges such as soil degradation, deforestation, and water pollution, the Incan emphasis on balance and respect for the earth offers a model for how we can care for the land in a sustainable and equitable way. In addition to their physical agricultural systems, the Incas also cultivated a cultural system around food that influenced social structures and communal life. Agriculture in the Inca Empire wasn't just about producing crops, it was also about community. Farmers worked together, shared resources, and ensured that food was distributed across the empire to where it was most needed. This spirit of cooperation and mutual support remains a hallmark of rural life in many Andean communities today, where farming cooperatives and community-based agriculture play a key role in maintaining food security and strengthening local economies. These communities, though impacted by modern globalization and economic pressures, continue to uphold the values of reciprocity, sustainability, and respect for the environment, principles that were central to the Incan way of life. Local farming initiatives, such as community gardens, organic farming cooperatives, and seed-saving programs, are direct descendants of the Incas' holistic agricultural philosophy. The same principles that guided the Incas in their vast empire, caring for the earth, maintaining balance with nature, and sharing resources, are now being applied to modern farming systems that aim to be both environmentally and socially responsible. It's important to acknowledge that while the Incan agricultural system has influenced modern farming practices, there are still many challenges in reviving and preserving these traditions in a rapidly changing world. Modernization, Urbanization and climate change have altered the landscape, and many traditional farming communities face difficulties in adapting to these changes. However, the resilience of these ancient agricultural systems and the continued use of Incan practices in some rural areas suggests that these traditions have an enduring relevance. The Incan agricultural legacy is a testament to human ingenuity and the ability to adapt to challenging environments. The lessons we can draw from their practices offer valuable guidance for how we might approach agriculture in a more sustainable, inclusive, and ecologically balanced way. As we move forward in the 21st century, we have an opportunity to integrate the wisdom of ancient agricultural systems with modern technologies and knowledge. By doing so, we can build a more resilient and sustainable agricultural future, one that honors the relationship between humans, the land, and the environment, just as the Incas did. As we near the end of our journey through the intricate and innovative world of Incan agriculture, it's time to reflect on the long-term legacy the Incas have left us. While their empire may have crumbled centuries ago, the profound influence of their agricultural techniques continues to resonate with us today. The Incas didn't just shape the Andean region, they left an indelible mark on global agriculture, sustainable farming, and our relationship with the land. The Incas, as we have seen, were masters of environmental adaptation, and their agricultural methods were the backbone of their civilization. From terracing high-altitude slopes to building sophisticated irrigation systems, the Incas transformed the Andean landscape into one of the most productive and resilient farming regions in the ancient world. Today, this transformation is not just a historical curiosity. It's a reminder that, even in the face of environmental challenges, it's possible to work with nature rather than against it. In the present day, there is a renewed interest in sustainable farming methods that prioritize environmental stewardship, and the Incan system provides a remarkable template. The Inca approach to agriculture was built on principles that modern agriculture is rediscovering: sustainability, biodiversity, and long-term ecological balance. Their sophisticated water management systems, the diversity of crops they cultivated, and their understanding of soil health were not just innovative for their time. They offer practical solutions to the problems we face today. One of the most important lessons we can draw from the Incan agricultural system is the value of integrating technology with nature. While the Incas did not have access to modern machinery, they were innovators in adapting to and manipulating their environment. Their use of terracing, for example, transformed steep mountain slopes into productive farmland while preventing soil erosion and improving water retention. Today, terracing is being revisited in regions of the world where soil erosion and water scarcity are major concerns. This ancient practice is being combined with modern technology to create more sustainable agricultural systems. The concept of crop diversity is another major takeaway from the Incan system. By cultivating hundreds of varieties of crops suited to different climates and altitudes, the Incas reduced the risk of crop failure, ensured food security, and maintained soil fertility. In a world where monocropping has become the norm in many agricultural practices, the Incan focus on crop diversity offers a valuable counterpoint. Modern sustainable farming increasingly emphasizes the importance of growing multiple crops to protect against the risks of pests, disease, and climate change, a practice the Incas mastered centuries ago. In addition to their farming techniques, the Incas' relationship with the land offers us important insights into how we can live in harmony with nature. For the Incas, farming was not just an economic activity, it was a sacred practice. Their deep respect for the earth, reflected in their religious rituals and spiritual connection to the land, reminds us that agriculture is not only about food production, but also about fostering a relationship with the natural world. This principle of reciprocity, giving back to the earth what we take from it, has never been more relevant as we face the challenges of environmental degradation and resource depletion. The Inca philosophy of respecting the land, of nurturing the soil and water for future generations, can guide us in our efforts to create more sustainable and regenerative farming systems. Moreover, the Incas' ability to adapt and innovate in response to their environment is a model for the future. As the world grapples with the challenges of climate change, water scarcity, and soil erosion, the ability to think creatively about how to farm in challenging conditions is more important than ever. The Inca Empire's agricultural methods were not static. They evolved in response to changing environmental and societal conditions. This adaptability, combined with a deep knowledge of the land, enabled the Incas to thrive in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. Today, we face our own environmental crises, and just as the Incas adapted to their world, we must adapt to the world we have now. One of the lasting legacies of the Inca Empire is how their agricultural methods are intertwined with social systems. In the Inca Empire, farming wasn't just about producing food, it was about ensuring that every member of society had access to sustenance, no matter where they lived. The state-controlled Colca storehouses and the Mita labor system helped redistribute food across the empire, ensuring that no one went hungry. This communal approach to agriculture, where food is seen as a shared resource rather than a commodity, offers valuable lessons in an age where food inequality is a growing problem. The Inca system shows us that food security is not just a matter of production, but also a matter of equitable distribution. Today, many indigenous Andean communities continue to practice traditional farming methods that were passed down from the Incas. These communities, while facing challenges from modern economic systems, continue to use ancient agricultural techniques to grow their crops. Their knowledge of the land, honed over centuries, is being integrated into contemporary farming movements focused on sustainability, food sovereignty, and environmental justice. These communities are not just preserving the Incan legacy, they are adapting it to the needs of today's world, ensuring that their agricultural traditions endure and thrive in the face of modern challenges. As we look to the future of farming, we must remember the lessons the Incas taught us about sustainability, resilience, and respect for the earth. The agricultural systems they created were not just about feeding an empire, they were about creating a lasting relationship between humanity and the land. Their legacy is one of innovation, adaptation, and harmony with nature, and it is a legacy that can guide us as we face the challenges of feeding a growing global population while protecting the planet. In the end, the story of Incan agriculture is not just a chapter in the history of the Andes. It's a story of agricultural innovation and ecological wisdom that transcends time and place. As we continue to learn from the past, we can apply the principles of sustainability, respect for the land, and community-based agriculture that the Incas developed to create a more resilient and harmonious future for all. As we approach the final stretch of this journey through the Inca Empire's agricultural brilliance, it's time to reflect on how the Incan agricultural legacy is more than just an ancient story, it's a guiding force for our future. From their mastery of terraces and irrigation, to their sustainable farming practices and deep connection with the land, the Incas have left us a legacy that speaks directly to the challenges we face today. While the empire itself has long since fallen, its lessons continue to resonate in the ways we farm, consume, and live in harmony with the environment. The Incas, through their ingenuity and resourcefulness, built one of the most sustainable and diverse agricultural systems the world has ever seen. The empire spanned a vast array of climates, from the freezing highlands to the desert coast, and yet they managed to produce a wide range of crops, each suited to its environment, while ensuring that no one in their empire would go hungry. They used methods that maximized food production while preserving the integrity of the land for future generations, making them pioneers of sustainable farming long before it became a buzzword. In our current age, where environmental degradation, soil depletion, and water scarcity are pressing global concerns, the Incan approach to agriculture offers invaluable lessons in how to maintain ecological balance while feeding the world. One of the most powerful aspects of Incan farming was their deep understanding of ecosystems and natural cycles. They didn't see themselves as separate from nature, but as part of a larger, interconnected system. This holistic view allowed them to create farming systems that not only fed millions, but also respected the land's natural rhythms, ensuring that it remained fertile for generations to come. Modern agriculture, on the other hand, has often prioritized short-term gain over long-term sustainability. The widespread use of chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and monoculture farming has led to environmental problems that threaten the planet's future. But by returning to the principles of Incan agriculture, we can begin to reimagine a more sustainable way forward. Techniques like crop diversification, the use of organic fertilizers, water management systems that work with, rather than against, natural processes, and the protection of soil health can all be integrated into contemporary farming practices to create a system that is not only productive but also regenerative. One of the most striking elements of the Incan agricultural system was its resilience. The empire lasted for centuries despite facing extreme geographic and climatic challenges. The Incas had to constantly adapt their methods to cope with changing conditions, whether it was managing floods in the lowlands or growing crops at high altitudes. Today, as we face the challenges of climate change, we can look to the Inca as an example of how human ingenuity and adaptability can meet environmental challenges. The key to their success was not fighting against nature, but working with it, using knowledge and observation to find sustainable solutions that allowed them to thrive in diverse and challenging environments. The Incan agricultural system was also deeply rooted in the idea of community. Farming wasn't just about individual success, it was about the collective well-being of the empire. The Mita labor system ensured that everyone contributed to the agricultural process, and the distribution of food through kolkhas and other storehouses made sure that no one went without. In today's world, where food inequality remains a significant issue, we can learn from the Incas about how agriculture can be used as a means to promote social equity and communal welfare. By prioritizing local food systems, food sovereignty, and the equitable distribution of resources, we can begin to address some of the most pressing challenges of our time. The legacy of the Incas also extends beyond farming. It includes their philosophical approach to life and agriculture. The spiritual connection the Incas had with the earth, their belief in reciprocity with nature, and their understanding that the land needed to be cared for and respected are values that can guide us today. Modern agriculture often treats the land as something to be exploited, but the Incan approach reminds us that we must take care of the earth, to nourish it, and ensure that it remains viable for future generations. This philosophy of stewardship is at the core of sustainable farming and should guide our actions moving forward. One of the most enduring lessons from the Incas is their ability to innovate in the face of adversity. The challenges they faced were vast: the harsh environments, the political pressures, and the logistical hurdles of managing such a large empire. Yet, despite these challenges, they created systems that were efficient, sustainable, and above all, adaptable. As we face our own global challenges, climate change, population growth, and the depletion of natural resources, we can take inspiration from the Incan ability to innovate, adapt, and find solutions that balance human needs with environmental sustainability. In many ways, the future of agriculture may lie in looking back to the wisdom of ancient civilizations like the Incas. By learning from their methods and integrating their knowledge with modern science and technology, we can create a future where farming is not only productive, but also in harmony with the environment. The Inca legacy is a testament to the fact that sustainable, resilient agriculture is not a new concept. It's been practiced for thousands of years. The challenge now is to rediscover and build upon these age-old practices to create a more sustainable and equitable agricultural system for the future. As we close this journey into the heart of Incan agriculture, it's important to recognize the continuing relevance of their knowledge. The Incas understood that farming was more than just a way to produce food. It was a way to build community, honor the earth, and ensure the survival of future generations. The principles they lived by, respect for nature, sustainability, cooperation, and innovation, are just as vital today as they were in the time of the Incas. It's up to us to carry this legacy forward, applying the wisdom of the past to the challenges of the present and future. Through collaboration, innovation, and a renewed respect for the earth, we can ensure a sustainable agricultural future for all.